And we're live. Yeah, man. I saw your content on X. We'll call it X since that's the official name now. We'll call it X. I saw your content on X, and I followed through to your site, and I watched some of your presentations on DEF CON and Blue Hat. You have some really cool shit in your background. 0-day researcher. Professional 0-day researcher, which is actually no, there was a grimace there.
It's just like anything professional. I'm just like, really, me?
Yeah,
like, fuck out of here. But yeah, no,
I know, right? We hear our titles sometimes and it sounds crazy, but yeah, it's for real. Professional 0-day researcher, offensive security engineer, like I said, DEF CON speaker, offensive con speaker. Elvis, welcome to SquidSec Podcast.
Well,
I'm super pumped to get to speak to you. I know there's a lot of people out there that will be interested in hearing what you have to say about your career and how you broke into information security and how you got into IoT hacking, and maybe even a little bit about how, I don't know, you're a cancer survivor, which is amazing. I didn't do the math, but I mean, it's probably like 15 years now, something like that.
Oh, let's see here. It happened in 2007 or 2007, 18 years ago.
Wow.
Yeah, dude,
that's awesome.
Time flies when you're getting old, but yeah.
And you're totally clear.
Yeah. So I just have to get blood work done every year to make sure like all my markers and stuff aren't like coming back, but it's just once a year checkup. They draw blood and then they do a physical exam to make sure like my lymph nodes and everything are okay. And then a chest x-ray on top of it, just to make sure like all the low common hanging fruit for that type of shit doesn't occur again.
How'd that impact your life? Like, did that impact your diet and stuff? Did you change everything about yourself? I know a lot of people do.
Yeah. So it had a big impact on my life. So I was about 21 at the time. I was a senior in college, and I was diagnosed in August of 2007. So it was like a few weeks before going back to school to finish up my last year of college. And so that kind of, it just happened randomly. But yeah, back then, like I was like a super gym nut. Like a lot of folks back in 2007, like UFC was big. Everyone and their grandma was doing jiu-jitsu, whatever, right?
Everybody wanted to be the Iceman, Chuck Liddell.
And like Tito Ortiz and all that shit, right?
Yeah.
And there was no like pain or anything else like that. So I kind of ignored it for a few days. And then about 2 or 3 days later, it about doubled in size.
Wow, that fast?
Yeah, and I was like,
holy shit!
Again, no pain, no like symptoms. Like it just was large, and the physical feeling of it was like if you take like a closed bottle of water before you open it, like a Dasani or something, and just squeeze that, same resistance, right? Wow. So it was just like hard.
That's crazy.
But no pain. Like I wasn't tired. I had no other symptoms. So ended up going to the ER, and they did a physical exam, all that stuff, and then sent me down to ultrasound, did blood work and all that stuff, and they came back an hour later like, hey, like, yeah, dude, you got straight up like the Lance Armstrong edition of cancer. I'm like, cool.
Wow.
I'm like, okay. So I asked I had a few questions. So I was like, well, A, how did you even test me? Like, what was the blood work for? And they're like, well, the blood work was something called an HCG test, which in women is like a pregnancy indicator. But in men, it's a cancer indicator. The next steps, right? Yeah. So I was like, all right, so what's next? So he's like, all right, so you're going to have to go to an oncologist, and we're going to have to assess like where you're at and then come up with a treatment plan. Just to like fast forward a little bit, after all this stuff, the treatment plan, I have two options. They gave me something called the EP cycle, which was etoposide cisplatin. Those are the two chemicals, and it's 4 cycles. A cycle is 40 hours. It's 8 hours, 5 days a week, Monday through Friday. That's one cycle. So it'd be 4 cycles for EP. There's another one called BEP, etoposide cisplatin. I forgot what the B chemical was, but it would be one less treatment. But the problem is the B chemical has this side effect of putting scars in your lungs. So he's like, your breathing capacity will go down for life. And I was like, wow, 40 hours to exchange, like not being able to breathe well. I'm like, fuck that. So I was like, let's go with the EP cycle. I'd rather do it longer. Like, let's just go for it, dude. Like, I don't want scars.
Yeah, you're a young guy at the time, right? You said
I was 21. Yeah, so I was like, fuck it. Like, I was in good shape too. Like, I was probably around like 15% body fat, $170. So like I was in good shape. So I was like, let's go for it. Let's just tackle this head on and let's get this shit done. Because what happened was after surgery, like I got the affected thing removed and all that stuff. It had spread throughout my body because I was so active, blood pumping, all that stuff.
I'm sorry, you said it had or it hadn't?
Yeah, it did.
Oh, wow.
So after surgery, they did more blood work. And they're like, hey, like it's in some lymph nodes. We can see them, but the problem is they're too small to operate on. So that's when they forward me off to the oncologist. And they're like, all right, we need to figure out if you need chemotherapy, radiation, or both. So
wow, that's some scary shit.
At the time, dude, I was just like, I just want to get this shit over with.
Yeah, but it never occurred to me that it would spread. First off, it never occurred to me that it would grow that quickly. You said it was like 2 days or whatever.
It was
That's
like 2
wild.
or 3 days. Like
and then it's spreading over your body. That's crazy.
I asked them if
especially
they could,
for a young guy.
Yeah, I asked the doctor. I remember I was like, hey, do you know, like, can you guess like how like old this tumor thing is? He's like, honestly, maybe like a few weeks. Like you caught it really early. I was like, all right, cool. So anyways, fast forward, surgery, found out that it's still in some lymph nodes, all that shit. And so the doctor said, you're in stage 2B. That's the stage of cancer I had for testicular, the Lance Armstrong edition of this stuff. So he was like, you're in stage 2B. He goes, you need only chemotherapy, which is good. Radiation's not on the table because it's not like localized into one spot. It's throughout your entire body. So we need to pump you full of chemicals. So I was like, all right, cool. So I signed up for the EP thing. Like I said, let's just do one more treatment. I don't want to have the side effects for the rest of my life. And so I went through it, and like, honestly, dude, I went into it not knowing shit. Like I was like, they're just pumping me full of stuff, like whatever, like it should be fine. I had some nasty side effects for that shit. Like
what?
So let's get into it. So the first 2 days, usually fine, like maybe a little tired. Wednesday is when the side effects would start kicking in. The one that would start the most was hiccuping. So I would hiccup nonstop. Even in my sleep, I would hiccup to the point where my esophagus started to get inflamed.
That's weird. That's a weird side effect.
Just
that had to have been horrible.
It was so fucking annoying. It was nonstop.
Did you try holding your breath?
No. So get this. So it was, I tried all that shit, but it was like involuntary. Like you can't stop it. So like I would hiccup, and get to the point where my throat would get like really sore and it would close up randomly. So then I would stop breathing.
Shit.
So I would stop breathing. And there was times where I'm driving myself to chemo and I'm hiccuping, and then I can't breathe. I have to fucking pull over and then like get my shit together. And it's so annoying because I'm just like, dude, like let's just get this fucking thing. Sorry. The whole thing was just annoying to me because it's like side effect after like you're lethargic. Okay, so the first thing, the hiccuping, right? The next one was throwing up. So throwing up wasn't that bad until after Friday. So I would hiccup, all that stuff. And also I had like some weird like changes in my like palate. For example, like I love peanut butter. Like I'll eat that shit straight out of the can straight out of the jar with a spoon, like all day, whatever. I love peanut butter. When I was on chemo, that shit made me like nauseous. I'm like, get that shit away from me. Yeah. I don't know why, but
another pregnancy symptom.
Weird. Yeah. So at that point, like I remember I was like, man, like I worked really hard to like get where I was at, 50% body fat, blah, blah, blah. But at that point I was kind of like, I just need to eat to survive. Like I can't keep anything healthy down. This sucks. The only thing I could keep down was Chinese food. So like I just ordered a bunch of fried rice and lo mein, all that stuff, and just whatever. Like I don't give a shit if I get fatter again. You
tried that again? Szechuan spicy peanut butter sauce?
No. Get out of here. So let's see here. So side effects. So during the hiccuping and some nausea and stuff like that, not being able to sleep well and crap like that because of the hiccuping. But then after Friday, 2 days of withdrawals. That sucked because, to get back, the cycle was this. You'd be one week on, so it's one cycle, and then 1 week off, 1 week on, 1 week off. So four treatments is 8 weeks, right? So after Friday, Saturday and Sunday, you start getting withdrawals from all the crap they pumped into you. So like for my first treatment, I actually developed what looked like shingles, but it was actually Decadron poisoning. They pumped too much anti-inflammatory steroid into me, and it
all over.
Yeah, because when you're done with the treatment, your body is trying to get rid of all this crap that's inside
shingles
of you.
Is no fun. I know a few people that have had that. That's pretty.
So it starts coming out of your pores, coming out of your mouth. So like it looked like I had pimples all over me at one point, and then
like chickenpox, right?
Yeah,
that's essentially what shingles. I think shingles is like an offshoot of chickenpox.
Yeah, they thought it was that at first, but they're like, no, this is actually Decadron poisoning. So they just put too much anti-inflammatory steroid into me. After they pulled it back, it never happened again. But anyway, so you would puke involuntarily again, and it would just be super random. You'd be talking and just come out. So like I remember one time, dude, like this memory is like engraved in my brain. So like it's after my first week of chemo, it was Sunday, and I'm like, dude, I really want like some chicken soup or something, just something I can try to keep down. It's easy. So I had all the ingredients. I made like chicken stock, all that stuff, and like I made my chicken soup. Took like fucking 4 hours. I eat it, and then it just comes straight up, and I just like I fucking spent 4 hours making that shit. And my roommate was like, "Ha!" So like it was kind of funny, but it just was so annoying because like some of the things that you can do normally, it's just like nope. Like you have no control over that involuntary vomiting and all this other crap.
So how long did it take to clear up? Like how long did it take to treat?
So
from the time you discovered it to the time it was like treated.
Yeah, so it was actually all 4 treatments. So I actually got lucky with this. So after the first treatment, I responded super well to the treatment. So after a full treatment, the full week, they pull your blood to see like where your cancer markers are. And for me, it was my HCG levels. After the first week, my HCG levels dropped in half. So they're like, you're responding really well to the chemo. Keep it going, keep it going. So we're at the 3rd treatment now. At the end of it, they do my blood work. They're like, we don't detect anything anymore, but we have to do the final treatment just in case of non-detectables that are still in your bloodstream, because those will grow back and like you'll start all over again. I'm like, okay, cool. So after the 4th treatment, I'm all good, all that good stuff. And then it's just like every month for the rest of my life, just keep getting blood work done and all that. Not every month, sorry. Once a year, sorry. So for the first year, it was every month. But then after the first year, it's just once a year after that. And I've been cleared since then. So like, it was just completely random. Like I don't have a family history of this stuff or anything else like that. Wow. Like it was just like out of the blue, like, and I wasn't doing like juicing or doing roids or anything else like that. Like I was legit like,
it was just
working out. Yeah, I was just working out all the time. And
that's crazy to me that somebody that's so healthy has that impact. Or has that issue. But I mean, I guess it random, is what it is,
Yeah, it's just random. Yeah.
How'd that impact? You said you were in college when that happened. What year were you in?
So I was a senior year.
It was senior year.
Yeah, my 4th year. So I went for a bachelor's.
What'd you go for?
Network engineering.
Oh, there you go. Nice.
So I'm originally a network guy, and we can talk about that because
we'll hold that against you.
Yeah. Well, there's a whole story about that too. I was an intern at Hewlett Packard at the time, and I was in Rhode Island at the time too. And so I was like, I don't really want to like live here anymore. Like the winters are brutal, like fucking dealing with blown pipes and crap like that sucks ass. Like shoveling the driveway.
I'm from the Northeast, so I know how it goes. It
shoveling the driveway just to have the plow fuck it all up again. So it's like I've never really ventured out ever in my life. Like I've been pretty secluded, like not allowed to like basically leave the end of the driveway while growing up per se, right? Like I've been pretty secluded. So I was like, fuck this. Like I almost legit just died. Like let's just have an adventure. So like at the time, the group that I was in called, oh my God, I forgot what it's called. It was for sand stuff. It was called disc something. I forgot. Anyways, they offered me a position for like when I was going to graduate and stuff. And I was like, you know what? Like after this whole experience, dude, like I don't want to be stuck here for the rest of my life. Like I want to go have an adventure. So I originally was going to just move to Phoenix, Arizona. Just fuck it. Like it was just random. Like I kind of like almost had not a crash out. It was kind of like this, like, dude, I almost died. Like I haven't experienced anything. Let's just fucking roll the dice and see what happens. Let's just go have an adventure. And, like I have skill sets that I can grow and like, whatever. Let's just see what happens. So I was going to move to Phoenix after graduating, but then I got a call from Hewlett Packard again, but this time in Houston, Texas. And they're like, hey, we saw your intern record and you have like a really good review and all this other stuff. Would you like to relocate to Houston and we'll pay for your relocation, all that stuff after you graduate? And I was like, Houston, Phoenix, fuck it, close enough. Never been in Texas my entire life. I don't give a shit. Let's go. Right. So graduation comes around, walk the stage, here's your degree. I sold everything I had to my roommates. I had a Nintendo Wii, $10. I had a surround sound system that like my father gave to me before he moved away to Washington, gave it to free for my roommates. All I had was a pack of clothes and a broken car.
So are you originally from Rhode Island then, or are you originally from Texas?
So originally from Puerto Rico, which is kind of fucked up.
Oh, all right. There you go.
But I went to college in Rhode
Island.
You're
well traveled.
Yeah, I'm all over the place, dude. I'm like Carmen Sandiego, but without the cool outfit. So yeah, I went to college in Rhode Island, went to a place called Johnson & Wales, which is kind of ironic. It's known as a culinary college, but...
Yeah, I know all about Johnson & Wales, actually.
J-Woo. Yeah. So
I went to culinary school when I was because I know you're into baking. I was going to bring that up with you. I went to culinary school when I was in high school. Went to a joint vocational school, and one of the next steps for people that were in that school was Johnson and Wales, or the Culinary Institute of America, the CIA.
Yep.
Culinary Institute of America. Yeah. I saw that you enjoyed baking. I thought that was pretty funny. I'm not as big into cooking anymore as I used to be. I did it when I was in school, and I don't know, it just wasn't for me. I suck at cooking. Cool. I love eating though.
So it's funny, like it's for me when it comes to cooking food, like it's just baking. Like I'm not one of those like, oh, come on over and grill stuff from I do have a Traeger oven and stuff, but it's just like not my interest per se. Like I do, but like baking is more than just like sweets to me. So the impact of cancer and stuff. So yeah, it maybe kind of opened my eyes going like, hey, you've been kind of like living in a box your whole life, never been outside of a few states and stuff like that. Like you should go have an adventure, like never been to Texas your whole life. This is an opportunity. Like they're paying for your relocation lump sum. They gave me $5,000. They said, just get here however you want. And that's when I sold all my shit. It was like, dude, I can buy like a new mattress and stuff like that when I get there. Like, so that's why I was like, fuck it. Let's just have an adventure, man. Like this is the beginning of the next chapter. Right.
So it sounds like it really like started your life, you know, it was a bad thing, but at the same time, it pushed you to
something clicked
out of your box.
It's just something clicked in my head. Yeah. Cause I was kind of like on this path of like, just like comfort, you can say, like everything was familiar with me and stuff like that. And I was like, if I'm going to grow in this world, you always have to push yourself out of that comfort and say, fuck it. Like throw yourself at it and just deal with whatever comes at you. So like I said, sold everything, just had my clothes in my hamper, like a little, one of those college hampers that's like made out of mesh, you know, and just threw it in my trunk and just drove to Texas. Like I graduated
from Rhode Island.
Yeah. Yep.
Nice.
So
that's a good drive.
It was 30 hours or something like that. Or 26 and some change. But I stopped at a few places because some of my friends after graduation, like my friend Ben, he moved to Tennessee. So I stopped in Nashville for a little bit and hung out with him, and just went to downtown Nashville and was like, explored that. Never been in Tennessee. That was kind of cool. But I graduated. And then 4 days after graduation, I started my job down in Houston. So it was really, really quick. But like I said, I was very motivated to kind of like push myself out of the comfort zone and just do something new. There was a quote, one of my friends from college, his name is Matt. That dude's awesome. Like I haven't talked to him in a long time, but he told me before I left, he goes, dude, one thing that's really cool about you. I was like, all right, you're starting off pretty strong, but okay, let's keep going. And he goes, whenever you say you're going to do something most of the time, it's most of the time, you usually actually do it. So like, for example, like when I said, like, I'm not going to live in Rhode Island forever, dude, like, fuck this place. I'm moving out and I'm going to find a job elsewhere. He's like, and you did it. I was like, yeah. So like that kind of stuck in my head. I was like, let's just keep doing what Matt said. Like, let's make a plan and commit to it and see what happens. So that's what the idea was. So when I moved to Houston, I was working for the network or IT division of HP IT. And I was at first and like an analyst, like a ticket analyst. So basically I had to like comb through all these incident tickets and find common issues to create problems in order to fix these things, in order to drive the ticket volume of incidents for this one asset or multiple assets, whatever it is, right? So
this is your first job out of college?
Yep. And that was boring.
When you got into that, how hard was that to get into that position? Because I mean, HP is a big name. It's not like it's a small company.
It was like lucky, man. Like it just fell on my lap per se. Like I had rejected the offer from HP up in Northeast to work in that division, which is good because they closed down. That whole facility is closed. It doesn't exist anymore.
Guess you missed a bullet there. Yeah,
they just called me one day randomly. I was out of class and I was actually walking to the gym and I got a call and they're like, hey, this is one of the managers down in HP in Houston, saw that you're ending your internship soon and we want to hire, interview you for a new position for an entry level. I was like, yeah, sure. And I interviewed not thinking I was going to get any offer, I was like, yeah, I'll just do it for funsies, whatever. And then when they came with me with an offer, like, hey, we'll pay you this base and then we'll give you $5,000 to relocate on your own. I was like, Phoenix, Houston, that's close enough, dude. And I have a position already in Houston lined up if I go with this. So like, fuck it. That's a better option than taking a huge risk with just $5,000 in my pocket and going to Houston. Oh, not Houston, Phoenix. So yeah. So moving out there was, that was like the next chapter of my whole life. Like, just took a huge gamble, was like,
That's
like,
cool.
like fuck it, like you only YOLO once per se, right? And so I just decided, like high risk, high reward, let's just go for it, man. Like, if things went wrong, I do have friends that I can call up and stuff like that. But I was more of the mindset of just like, hey man, let's just go for it. Like, if you can make this into like some sort of story in the future, that'd be cool. But for now, let's just see what happens. Just throw yourself at it. And if something doesn't work, we'll reassess and figure out how to fix that. But
so you were doing IT help desk stuff?
No. So at first I was an operational analyst per se. So
okay.
So what they would do is from the NOC, they would give me all the incident tickets that would come in. So like anything auto-generated or stuff that would come in from like, internal stuff like network down and HP and some EMEA or APJ region, whatever. And so I would take all these incident tickets in and then kind of start going through them to find common patterns, seeing like, oh, hey, we have like a failing failing blade on this like Cisco Catalyst thing that we need to replace because it's creating an incident every single week at this time with this kind of like it was that kind of crap. So it was very boring for me because it's not very like hands-on. It was more like reading and reading and reading. So I pushed back and I was like, is there any way I can join the NOC? Like, I want to be in the pit, because I said, this is my argument. I go, if I'm in like, the trenches with this guys, then I'll have more understanding of like what's going on, and I'll be able to detect better of like reoccurring things instead of just combing through incident tickets. So they're like, yeah, fuck it, let's do it. So after like 2 months of doing this like ticket thing, like I really hated it. I'm like, this is not for me, dude. I'm like, I'm a problem solver and I like getting my hands on, right? Just hands-on stuff. So like, okay, we'll transfer you over to the NOC because they need help. And I was like, all right, cool. So I was part of the level 3 NOC after that, or Network Operations Center. And that was L3. So after it went down the first 2 levels, it would come to us. So usually things were like any sort of like down interface, any sort of spanning tree loop errors, any sort of like global server load balancing errors, any sort of local load balancing errors. Like, hey, we have a real server that's failing. It's still all the traffic is still hitting that server because we don't have a layer 7 health check, only a level 3 health or layer 3 health check, so that the socket is still up, but the application is not responding. We need to take that real server out of rotation to get everything going again. I was like, all right, so those type of things. So that's what I was doing I did that for about 18 months or so.
I mean, that's real experience.
Yeah, it was great.
That's the real shit. Like a lot of people, they look at InfoSec and they want to jump in both feet and start red teaming. But the reality is it's like, those people, you talk to them and they have a decade of experience doing something totally unrelated. They know how to use a shell. They know how to use Linux. They know all the PowerShell commands. They know all this stuff because they worked a help desk, or they they were a sysadmin, or like my background, I was a programmer for a lot of years. So, I used Linux and I know how .NET works. And, a lot of people, they want to jump into this stuff and they ask where to start. And I always tell them, like, go find an IT job. That's how you start. That's how you get into it. That's cool. So that kind of lays the foundation then for b1ack0wl, for the person you manifested into, right?
Yeah, like kind of like, so the network stuff was really interesting because so let's back up a little bit. So let's go to when I was in like my teens, I guess, like a little teeny bopper, hot topic shopper, whatever, right? Mall rat dude. But so I grew up so just to throw this out there before I go into this, like the environment I was born into, I'm very lucky. Like straight up, like I'm not gonna color code it, or I'm not gonna fucking downplay it. Like the environment I was born into, I'm very lucky because it set me up for where I am today. If I wasn't born into where I was, like I'd probably have a much different path than what I'm about to discuss. So anyways, so the reason why I wanted to disclaim that is because like my father, he is he used to be a DEC employee. So, he was a big computer guy and stuff like that. Before digital, he used to build like a Heathkit from Radio Shack, Heathkit H8, a little computer thing that you build yourself.
That's cool.
And he actually still has a website to this day. So my last name, Collado, is how you say it in like English and all that stuff, but in Spanish is Collado. And so his website is Collado, Koyado. It's his website. And I've never done any security shit on it. So like, it's probably like, you can probably blink at it and get a shell most likely. But like, I don't know the security posture of his website, but he uploads a lot of like PCBs for like attaching common peripherals to a Heathkit. Like there's like a USB attachment. There's all this crap that he's made, because apparently there's a community up in Washington state and like in the Northwest region where there's still an active community for these Heathkit machines. And I asked him, I go, all your PCBs are through hole. Like, why? Why not do any surface mount stuff? And he goes, everyone in this community is old. Like, no one has the fingers for like surface mount stuff, dude. He's like, everyone has to use the big chunky through hole like resistors and caps and stuff like that. I'm like, okay, I get that. Okay, you got me. All right, I get it.
Gotta have the dexterity.
Yeah, because I was like, your PCBs are huge, dude. I'm like, why? And he's like, that's why. I'm like, gotcha. All right, cool, makes sense. But yeah, no, so he's a big nerd and all that stuff, and I resonated really well with that. One of the stories he told me when I was growing up was that when I was like 3, 4 or something like that, or even younger than that, when he was on the computer, because he built a computer for home. It was like a what was it? He used to have an 8086, but then he built another one. I think it was a 386 machine. And so whenever he was on it, I would be fussy and be like, yo, put me on your lap, basically, right? And so when he did that, I would just stare at the keyboard, like just straight up, like just stare at it. And when he was done, I would press the same keys in the same patterns with the same delays that he did. And so after a while, he said, I learned how to use format. Like this was DOS, right? Mm-hmm. So I learned format.com, right? Learn that command or the application. And so when he would come home from work, the whole C drive would just be wiped.
I'm sure he appreciated that.
Yeah. So he would like ask my mom, he's like, the fuck? Like, what happened? And she was like, I don't know. Like Elvis was just pressing keys on the keyboard and I just let him have fun. And so he started watching me. That's when he noticed I would just type in format // and just keep hitting yes and enter and all that crap. And so he built me my own machine out of spare parts that he found at work.
That's cool.
I started doing the same thing to that. So I would keep formatting that machine over and over. So then he started to teach me. Well, before building my own machine and teaching me, he said that he hid the power cord for the machine for me one day. And he came home early from work, and my mom was like busy cleaning or something, and she wasn't watching me. And apparently I found the cable and I was trying to plug it into the wall. And my dad's like, you're going to kill yourself, dude. So it kind of spooked him. And he's like, well, I can't really, deter this kid from like messing with my computer. So I'm going to make him one. So he built me my own computer. I started formatting the shit out of that. So then that's when he started teaching me like, this is how you copy files, this is how you use edit, this is how you use type with con to go from like a console to like a text file, and started learning DOS. I think it was like DOS 5, and then eventually we got 622, and then eventually got Windows 3.1, which was like, and then we modified autoexec.bat so that it executed win.com upon startup, and that was even more magical. I was like, holy shit, dude.
I don't care what anybody says. I think the 90s was such a magical time to come up in tech. I mean, like it's such a beautiful blend of, the classical computing and like DOS and stuff, but also, you're getting the internet and, AOL, and you get this nice mixture. The people growing up these days, they don't get that. They totally missed out on all of it. Like everything is too tiny to tinker with. You take something apart and, it just, you can't even see it just looks like a hologram. You can't even see the components on the boards, Yeah, it's sad. I definitely resonate with what you're saying. I grew up, I'm a 90s kid. I had a 486 and, Windows 3.1 and, I had all that stuff, and it was such a good time. It was very inspirational back then to get into those things. And you punch things in on the computer and you see a program appear, and it's, it was simple. Yeah. Different.
So anyways, so he built me my own computer and all that stuff. So the next thing he started teaching me DOS, all that crap. And then we get into playing games on your computer. Cool. So one of the first games that I was introduced into DOS outside of like stuff for the Heathkit that I played was Wolfenstein, right?
Wolfenstein.
So Wolf 3D. Yeah. So I had the demo, right? Which was just the first level. And I would play the shit out of that over and over and over.
The shareware version or whatever? Or was that? Yeah, that was the version that everybody played, right?
So it was just like one level. It was just the first level, and that was it. And then like at the end, it would be like, connect to our BBS boards or whatever and get the full license or unlock the full thing, blah, blah. Well, my dad comes home one day with a floppy disk. All right. And he goes, Elvis, copy the contents of this file to this folder. I'm like, okay. And he goes, launch Wolf 3D. Every single level was unlocked. I was like, holy
that's cool.
Shit, dude. Like, fuck out of here. What the hell just happened, right? So I'm obsessed about this. But what's really bothering me is how did you get this? How did this happen? Who did you get this from? So I kept pestering my dad nonstop. Like, where did you get this? Silent. Where'd you get this? Silent. Just nonstop. Until I started asking him, when he would bring me to his work at times, like whenever I had days off from school and stuff. And like I said, he worked at digital. So like, it was really nice to get like, exposed to like a lot of like the innards that he did. Because he was in like power supply design. And so for these like servers or rack units.
So he's mega smart then, because if he's in power supply, he's probably good at math.
Yes.
Probably good. Yeah.
So he would do a lot of chamber testing and stuff like that. So he would bring me in and do a like, we're going to put the component in the chamber. We're going to make it hot, make it cold, all this other crap. And I think he used something called not TeamViewer. Shit. No. TeamViewer is that thing. No. So, oh my God. There was an automation thing. I forgot now. But I got exposed to a bunch of that stuff, which is pretty cool. But anyway, so I kept asking him. And then one day, like, I ended up asking him in front of his coworkers at lunch, because he would bring me to lunch, and like it was like a cafeteria where you do a walkthrough and you get like things, and at the end they would like weigh like your French fries or whatever you pay, right? And so I'm with eating with my dad and his coworkers, and I'm like, where did you get Wolf 3D from? Like the full one. And finally stops and he goes, that guy. And that guy was named Nestor Hernandez is his name. Not to dox him, but now I did. But so he goes, Nestor gave me that. And so I was like, now my focus is on Nestor. I'm like, hey, where did you get this? And he goes, don't worry about it. He goes, but if you need something, just let me know and I'll get it for you. That really didn't sit well with me, because I was like, why? Why are you the guardian for this stuff? If you know something that I can do, why aren't you sharing this information? So again, started pestering him whenever. So my dad and Nestor were really good friends, and they would throw parties like once every quarter or something, every 6 months. So Nestor was also Hispanic, and would do these things called pig roasts and just have a bunch of people over, whatever. And so I got really good friends with the kids named Lennis, and I forgot the daughter's name, but I ended up asking Lennis. I go, do you know how your dad gets this shit? And he goes, yes, I do. And I go, awesome. So he ends up telling me, he goes, all right, so there's this program called, I think it was called Agent 95 or Agent 99, something like that. But it was news groups. It was a news groups application. And he goes, connect to the server. And he just like brought it up, the settings, and just wrote it down on a piece of paper. He goes, connect to this, go to alt binary games, and you'll see everything. And so went home, installed the application they gave me on a floppy disk, copy pasted all the settings, connect to the server, alt binary games, doom, 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 doom. I'm like, holy shit. So like Wolf 3D, then I download Doom 2. Started going through all those things, doing Jazz Jackrabbit, all these other DOS games. So now I'm getting exposed to this stuff, and I'm like, wow, this is really cool. So then that introduced me into like IRC. So this like more or less kind of like how I got introduced to like piracy.
How old were you?
So when I got introduced to like the piracy stuff, I was like 9 or 10. So it was about
around what year?
96, 97.
96?
Yeah, so it was about 10.
Okay.
Or yeah, 95, 96. Yeah, that's when it was.
Sounds like you and I are about close to the same age. I didn't get into that stuff until a little bit later. I was into computers and stuff in the 90s, but I just didn't have, that just wasn't a part of my life the way that I wish it would have been. But yeah, I came into that around like the Napster and Kazaa era. The Napster and Kazaa, so a few years later probably. But yeah, it's amazing the things you could find back then before there was very robust piracy protection. You could find like anything. You just had to wait, 12 days for it to download.
Yeah, so on IRC, you can also download a bunch of whatever you want, music videos, whatever. They have these like bots that you just do like in chat commands, and they would DM, like send you a direct message and be like, send me like a list of everything you're offering, send you a list of all the stuff, like all your programs, games, applications, music videos, CDs, stuff like that. And so like on there, that's where I started downloading. I went from like news groups to like IRC to like download like PlayStation 1 games. My dad buys a PS1 and I start playing with it too. And I was like, oh, this thing's pretty awesome, blah, blah, right? And we have a local Blockbuster and stuff like that. And one day my dad comes home and he's like, hey, I just learned about these things called open box computer shows. And they have this external SCSI CD writer, a 2x2x4, and it was just a few
SCSI. God, I missed that.
So I was like, what is this? He goes, you can make your own CDs. I was like, no fucking way. So it was like, first thing I did, I copied a PlayStation game, my own Crash Bandicoot, like the one I owned. And I was like, let's copy and put on the disk, because if it's reading from a disk, like why can't I just copy paste and it should be the same thing? Put it in there. It just goes to like the music menu, and I'm like, it's not booting it. I'm like, what the fuck is going on? So my dad started talking to people at work, and someone outside of Nestor was like, hey, I know a guy that makes mod chips for these things. And at the time, I didn't know what the protection was. Like, I didn't know about the wobble track or anything else like that. Like, I was completely oblivious. All I cared about was like, why isn't this working? And so my dad got the chip. It was like $20. And so he brought me to his work after hours. It was like 9 p.m. Brought me to the lab where all the soldering stuff is, like the best of the best, right? Like the fucking Cadillac of soldering stations. Like the thing was baller. And we just had the instructions and we took apart the PlayStation and he taught me how to solder. So that was my first experience about soldering, was modifying my PS1 to play backup games. Okay, they're backups. They're not copies. They are backups, just in case I scratch my own CD. Yes.
That's exactly right.
These are backups. And, you know, maybe there was some downloading of backups from like, you know, like Japanese games for PS1 because it's region unlocked. I don't know, dude. But anyways, so you can download like, you know, like I said, like anything off IRC, right? From these bots. And so I downloaded this one game. It was like a Prince of Persia 3D thing at the time. And they run like the crack me and all that stuff. Not the crack me, but like, you know, the crack generator. Yeah. The crack generator thing with the freaking music like yeah. Like I installed the game and I'm like, man, my machine is fucking slow. So one day I get home from school, turn on my computer. It's a Persia. I'm playing Wake Up Neo or some bullshit like that. And so I had just smashed the keyboard and I saw that I could type. I was like, the fuck? So I smash it and I just go like, what the hell is this? And so I started going back and forth. Long story short, the thing I downloaded had sub 7 attached to it. And so I infected myself with sub 7. Nice. And my machine was directly connected to the internet, right? Because you had dial up. And so you're directly connected to the internet. There's no natting. There's no firewalls. You're just direct peer to peer to peer at this point. So I started asking this guy. I was like, start with this person. I was like, what happened? What's going on? Blah, blah, blah. And we start going back and forth. And he asked me, he's, how old are you? And dude, I'm like 12 or 13 at this point. So I literally said, I'm like, I'm 12, dude. Like, and now I'm thinking about it. And like, this is the meaning, like, I'm 12. What is this? Like, that's literally where I was at. And so this guy was just like, I can teach you like how I infected you, how I found out you were infected, all this other stuff and what it was. And I was like, hell yeah, dude, let's do this. That's 12. Cool. I'm fucking 12. I don't fucking know, right? And looking back at that, like how crazy is that? Like I could.
It's cool that you were willing to mentor you, though. I mean,
yeah, like I could have been walking into like some trap, but I'm
it could have been like child sex predator trafficking shit.
Yeah, but I'm over here at 12 years old, la la la, like, you know, my computer looks like the Matrix. This is cool, so cool. And so like he would like open up the CD drive and I was like, oh, that's so fucking cool, dude. So like I end up asking him like, you know, like how I do this shit and blah blah. And that's when he brought me to other IRC channels on FNet. I'm not going to discuss those. And got introduced to a lot of like, you know, sketchy shit, you can say. Like I got introduced to 0 days right off the bat, like stuff that wasn't on Hasta La Vista. You know, like they would post them in this channel and like it would be like a Perl script. And at the time, like I couldn't wrap my head around the stuff in here. I'm like, what's all these hexadecimal numbers? And like, what the fuck is this? And I even
if you don't have a background in that, it looks like magic. And even if you do, have a background in it, hexadecimal, you're not gonna sit there and read it, you know.
And I even pinged the guy in RC, and I was like, hey, like the guy who like originally got me with sub 7. I'm like, hey, what the fuck is this? He goes, honestly, dude, that's way over my head. And he goes, I honestly don't know. It's easier just to get people to run a server program than it is to do this stuff. I'm like, all right. So I kind of like, I tried to wrap my head around it a few times, but I just couldn't resonate. I couldn't get it. I couldn't figure it out. But the thing was, if you ran it against a environment that you own, right? Nothing nefarious, like you do it on your own environment, it would work. I'm like, the fuck, this is so cool. So like I got introduced to like script kiddie shit. Like that's literally what it is. Like it's nothing like I'm Mr. Robot. No, it's fucking script kiddie bullshit. So like, but it got me into this like realm. And like I also would get like 0 days from like AIM, like they would post, but just for like crashes. And so I would kick my friends offline and shit like that. So like I would be like, so there was this one, I still remember the top of my head. So it was AIM. And if you send a chat invite to someone and you put #pound 770 : or, you know, like It's an HTML code. If you put that in, it would null pointer deref and just crash the whole thing. So
Nice.
You could just send it to anyone, chat invite, ampersand pound 770, semicolon or colon, and just do it over and over and over and over and over. Yeah, dude, I was a little shithead, like per se, with my friends with that. But like a lot of them were really entertained. You're like, how'd you do that? And so I would send them the thing in a area that wouldn't cause the crash. I'm like, just put this in the text area of a chat invite and it will crash immediately. And you're like, oh, that's so cool. I'm like, I know, dude. Mind you, I'm like 13 now, maybe turning 14. So like the immaturity level is all the way there, right? So, but this is my experience with like security and stuff. Like outside of like tricking people to download like Sub7 or NetBus or whatever, then there's the other part of like, well, what is these software's, vulnerability stuff? Like, how does these exploits work and all this stuff? Honestly, I didn't really take it seriously until I was about 24. But we'll get to that in a minute, I guess. But I feel like I've been rambling a lot. Sorry. Is there any other areas you want to talk about before we kind of like venture off?
So like, you mentioned the 90s, and I just I don't know if you watch these videos or not. I'm like mega nerd, so
like the broken and stuff, or
no, I get into these videos when they talk. It's like engineers. So we spoke about Doom, right? So like id Software. I don't know if you've ever listened to any of their developers talk about like the original creation of Doom.
No, but I have the book.
So if anybody is listening and you're like interested in real computer science solving real problems, the 90s era, anything along the lines of like Nintendo games or Sega games or computer games, the problems they solved were really fascinating. Like refresh rates on screens, and how many sprites you could hold in memory, and how they reuse sprites, and just there's a YouTube channel. When you were talking about the video game stuff, I was trying to remember this guy's YouTube channel, and I completely forgot it, but he worked on all these Sega games like Toy Story, and
I think I know what you're talking about. And he made
I can't think of his name.
He made a video about the Sega Saturn and using the DSP to render like the background stuff in real time. Yeah, I forgot his name.
Yeah. There's his channel though. There's so much great content out there. Because I mentioned it to you before the show. I spent 13 years as a software engineer doing .NET development and C#, and the type of development that we do, modern software. I'll call it modern. In 10 years, it won't be modern, but in modern software it's so abstracted from real problems. Like we don't build our own data structures. We use existing objects in the libraries that like we just kind of implement it. But yeah, in the 90s they had real problems. Like they had to think about how much memory they had. They had to think about how fast the processor was, what the refresh rate was on the screen, and the way they solved those problems is just fascinating. Like drawing half of the screen and then mirroring it to save on space, or the way they came up with different sounds and stuff. So I just wanted to paint that picture a little bit. As you were talking about the 90s, those are all the things that came flooding into my mind, is that this was the era of, in my perspective, I'm sure somebody that grew up in the 70s would probably say it was them, but I think the 90s were like really a golden age for computer science, people that were looking to get into it.
Yeah, like the biggest thing was the hardware constraints, right?
Yeah. Now it's like we don't talk about that. The only time we talk about that now is when we talk about, graphics processing or AI. Like AI, training models and stuff. There's a big conversation around hardware now because of that, because of how intensive the hardware requirements are. But I mean, I could write basically every program I've ever written. We never talked about really hardware or RAM. I mean, maybe one time we talked about how much available space in RAM Windows gave us. It's just a very rare conversation because it's so abundant. The only time you care about it is when you actually have like a memory leak. when you actually write something that is trash code, then you care about it. But
like,
for the most part, like
why is my program hitting swap? What the fuck?
Right? Like most of the time, we just don't think about that stuff. We just the things we care about are like transfer, like between machine to machine, because there's some bottlenecks in networking, which I'm sure you're well aware of. But like round trips, between a browser and a server, we care about that kind of stuff. Or we care about, a connection to a database server, and, how we're choking that and what services and things. So those are the conversations we have today, not so much like how much RAM the person that is installing this computer or installing this software has. It's just not a thing anymore. It's just interesting.
No, it definitely is. And then like even when you talk about RAM stuff, it just makes me think about like from an offensive side. So like back in, let's call it the 2010s, like everything was mostly 32-bit and stuff like that. So you have a max of 4 gigs of RAM because that's just your max 32-bit value, right? Now you have machines that are like, 32, 64, 120 and stuff like that. So it's like when you have a bug that requires out of memory, it's like how, and with the application, it's like, well, sometimes when you have JavaScript, you just keep going until you get out of memory issue and then you go from there. But it's like when you have other applications, like, well, how do you like really determine that? So like sometimes where it's like when everything was 4 gigs, like if you look at old exploits for like Internet Explorer, everything was like static. It's like we only have to spread this many because the maximum is 4 gigs on every single machine. Now that size is dynamic, and so you need some more feedback and more information to be like, am I in the place I need to be in order to do this exploit the way I intend it to be and stuff like that. So anyways, sorry, when you're talking about different RAM size and stuff like that, I'm like, that's one of the things kind of like you have to think about as an attacker outside of like mobile devices, because like sometimes they're kind of all the same RAM, but then you have your pro models, this and that have like 16, 24, 32, blah, blah, blah. So anyway, sorry, completely random tangent there. But yeah, it got me thinking about that because I was like, man, like I remember back in the 2010s, I used to do a lot of Internet Explorer research. And the reason why I was doing that was because I was working for a division. HP bought something called 3Com back in the 2010s. And 3Com had a division called Tipping Point. And Tipping Point was an IPS company. And so at the time I was working in that NOC that I was talking about earlier, that Network Operations Center. And so I just saw a job posting internal. It was just internal, non-external posting, just internal only, saying like, hey, we're looking for a QA person for Tipping Point to test our IPS and stuff like that. And I was like, this is an opportunity for me to revisit like the security stuff I did as a kid, because I had to pivot to networking because here's a story that's actually like kind of changed a lot in my life. And it happened when I was about 14. So remember how I was talking about sub 7 and stuff like that and how I got taught all that crap. So anyways, so I had an arsenal of like script kiddie toolkits or script kiddie stuff in my little arsenal toolkit, right? And one of them that I had was an executable wrapper where you could take 2 executables and wrap them together and execute both of them as one process. And I was like, cool. So, back in the days of like Flash animation, stuff like that, you could export a Flash animation as a standalone executable. And so you could take stuff from like Joe Cartoon or Newsgrounds or whatever, import into Flash and just export it as a standalone executable. Well, that gives me the ability to also include some action scripting and stuff like that inside the executable. Or I can just wrap it with sub 7, maybe just do some XORing on it and just put a little like decoder stub on it and just send it over. But again, script kiddie stuff. So I wasn't even going to do that. I was just going to fucking just smash them together. And so I had this like bully in 8th grade. And so like in 8th grade, I moved to a new town with just my dad. My dad just got through a divorce and it was kind of like a shaky environment. So like new kid, new school, 8th grade. Right. So, I'm just regular ass kid, whatever, with a goofy name. And I eventually got the attention of this one preppy kid, fucking Abercrombie and Fitch type fuck. Right. So he just kept talking shit and just would talk shit all the time and just kept like just being an asshole. So I eventually was like, well, like I was like 5'7", $130. Like I can't even kick my own ass. Right. Like I'm not going to beat.
Like a strong breeze will take you over kind of. Yeah, that's dude, how I was when I was a kid too.
Like I open up the pantry, get my ass kicked by the door. Like, oh shit. But anyways, like I was like, well, I can fuck his computer up, right? So like I was angry.
I'll show him.
It wasn't even just that. So like I was just like, fuck this guy. And I was like, but he trusts me with a lot of stuff on the internet. So I was like, let's use that to our advantage. So one day after school, I go, hey man, have you seen this like Flash animation thing? It's pretty funny. He's like, which one? I go, it's a new one on Newsgrounds, but you have to download it or else it doesn't work because something going on with the website. He's like, send it over. So this is AIM, right? So direct connection. So I send over the Flash animation with the sub 7 executable wrapped together. And so when the connection hit, just fucking go to command line, that's stat, see the connection, see where the connection's hitting from. All right, there's his IP address. And just start hitting port. What I do? Like, I think I did like 11111 or something like that. Hit, connected. I'm like, all right, cool. So I said, well, I don't want to fuck his computer up to the point where I can't repair it because that's not cool.
Yeah, that'd be a dick move.
So let's just delete himem.sys. So himem.sys, do you remember that file?
No.
So himem.sys is a driver needed back in the day of like Windows 95, 98 ME for Windows, for the machine to see more than a megabyte of RAM. You needed himem.sys to see more than a megabyte of RAM. Without himem.sys, the machine just thinks it only has a megabyte of RAM and will say not enough memory, Windows cannot continue. So that's it. So delete himem.sys, reboot his machine. Windows cannot continue, there's not enough memory. So I lived in a really small town and I saw the kid next day in school and he was pissed, right? And very, very upset with me. And I said, hey man, I can fix it, but you got to stop being a dick to me, right? And he was like, whatever. And I was like, all right, whatever. Keep having a broken machine, dude. I don't care. So that night, a knock happened on my door. It was like 9 p.m. I was about to go in the shower. And mind you, I was living like in an apartment duplex thing or whatever. And so the knock was from downstairs and I was upstairs and my dad opened the door like kind of like a little bit. And I just heard, is Elvis here? And my dad's like, Elvis, get your ass down here. I'm like, all right. So I go downstairs and I look over like past the door and there's this like fat like cop dude, right? And he goes, are you Elvis? I go, yeah. Another dude from behind him pushed open the door and tackled me and pushed me on my stomach. And he was like, you fucking piece of shit hacker. You know, we know what you did, blah, blah, blah. And my dad's Hispanic. And he was like, yeah, you little piece of shit, blah, blah. Like he was agreeing with the cops, right? He's like, fuck this kid. So they arrested me and they put me back in the car. And they took me saying,
how old were you?
I was 13, 14. Oh. So and plus I was in like my rebellious stage because like my parents just got through this really nasty divorce. And so like, I just didn't give a shit.
Yeah, it's a lot for a kid to go through.
I just didn't give a shit. So like, they put me back in the car and I'm not worried. I'm just like, whatever, what are you going to do? Arrest me? So like, they tell my dad, hey, we're going to bring him to this address, which is the kid's house, fucked up his computer on. And we're going to bring him there. And so before we left, I said, we're going to Kyle's house. And he said, yes. I said, okay, I have a floppy disk that I would like to bring with me. He said, okay, you can bring the floppy, but you have to go in the back of the car now. I'm like, okay. So back of the cop car, I have my little floppy disk that the one of the officers put in his pocket. Get to the house. There's already an officer there on the computer. And he goes, there's thousands of dollars of damages to the machine. This little fucking hacker piece of shit damaged your whole machine. What they would say. You're going to have to throw out this whole machine. You're going to have to get brand new stuff. It's going to be thousands of dollars. And so I remember, like, again, I'm 14, really not giving a shit, right? I really don't care about, like, whatever. Like, I just don't care. So I tell the guy, I'm like, can you just please move to the side? I can fix this right now. And he's like, no, there's thousands of dollars. I go, just please move. I'll fix it. So the floppy was bootable, right? Like when you do format, you have the /S switch in order to make something bootable, or /system, right? To make it a bootable floppy. So I have a bootable floppy and, I just put it into the floppy drive. I go into BIOS and I say, boot from the floppy disk. It goes into a command prompt and I just copy from the /himem.sys to c:/windows/system32 himem.sys. Reboot it. Windows loads. Oh, and there's the desktop, there's his wallpaper, there's his shitty Windows Plus animation crap, like with the little fucking mouse that's like a tiger or some shit. So it boots up, and I remember mocking the guy. I go, this thousands of dollars, and my dad just like, shut the fuck up, dude. So my dad was like really upset by it because the people that I impacted or like popped through this social engineering stuff per se, they were really like high status, and we were like, not, because my dad just got through a divorce, lost a whole bunch of money, living in an apartment, like that's where we were. So my dad was like kissing their ass, all this other stuff, and my punishment was that I wasn't allowed to use the computer anymore alone. I wasn't allowed to use the internet alone.
Jeez.
I wasn't allowed to leave his site. He would drive me to school, pick me up from school. I had to sit in his office while he worked, and I had to do my homework in front of him, and I had to go home. I had to be in bed by 9 p.m. all the way until I'm 18. No internet, no nothing unless I'm in front of him. So then I said, well, I want to learn about networking because I'm interested how this whole internet works. So when I was on the internet, I was only allowed to learn about how networking works. So then when I was 18, or not 18, but when I was about to graduate high school at 17, that's when I was like, hey, let's go to Johnson & Wales for this network engineering degree because it's corresponding where I'm doing right now. So I got punished pretty hard by my own father because he was scared that like I was going to get us into a lawsuit or something like that. So
yeah,
he was
end up in prison, bankrupt him. I'm sure there was all types of worries.
But that incident actually opened up a lot of doors. When when I went to college, right, I didn't have a job and stuff like that. Like before college, I was working as an intern, not an intern, like it was a co-op because I went to a vocational high school and went to computer shop. That's what I did in high school. And my senior year, I was able to do a co-op and I was working at this place as an IT person and stuff like that. And so I had some income, but when I went to college, that ended. No more co-op. So I didn't have any income and stuff like that. And eventually, like I was doing random jobs here and there, like on Craigslist, like I'd post stuff like, hey, I'll fix your machine or back up this or whatever. So I had some income doing that. But I eventually got a call from Hewlett Packard. And it was one of my like dad's old coworkers from digital. And he was like, hey man, I remember your dad telling me that you hack someone when you're younger. I'm like, hacking is a very strong word for what I did, but yeah, I'm still into security and stuff like that. I'm really interested. And he goes, we need someone with that kind of mindset in our team for this new intern position. Would you be interested in interviewing? I'm like, sure. Like I said, like whenever I interview for a position where someone's coming towards me, I'm usually like, I'm not going to get it. Like it's probably smoke and mirrors, whatever. And it was a pretty intense interview. I remember it was about 3 days and it was like, I think about maybe 12 hours in total. Like I met like one person, then another person, then another person, then everyone all together. And then I had to wait like a week for the verdict. And then they finally came back, was like, hey, we would like to hire you as a year-round intern. I go, what the hell is that? They go, in the summer, you'll be full-time. But when you're in school, you'll just be part-time. So like once a week or whatever you want. I go, okay, that sounds great.
That's a huge break.
But if
Did you realize that was a big break at the time?
Yeah, no, that was huge. Like I said at the time, I was just like, I'm not going to get this. They probably have someone already lined up. This is probably just for like, for shits and giggles.
Because getting your foot in the door is hard, even as an intern.
So
getting your foot in the door is difficult.
Yeah, that happened when I was 19. So if I didn't, do that shit and my dad talking about it with his old coworkers, and then one of his coworker eventually ended up at Hewlett Packard and then reached out to me because of all this stuff, like it wouldn't have gotten that opportunity. So like, yes, what I did to my bully in middle school was not ethical per se, but it did open up doors because at the time, like hacking and all this stuff was very like nefarious per se. Like it was for criminals only, like this whole stigma around it where it's very different today. But back then it was just like, it's for this special kind of mindset that's a criminal mind.
It's amazing how much the narrative around that has changed.
Yeah.
And, I mentioned it, I believe I mentioned it in the last episode, but we really do have the previous generations, the ones that were the criminals, to thank for it changing because they grew up and got jobs and started companies and created these things called bug bounty programs, and they changed but you mean they changed the narrative around what it meant to be a hacker. It went from being a criminal to being a computer scientist, a researcher, somebody that's trying to secure things. So yes, I know. Now I remember what we were talking about last time. We were lamenting the fact, we were commenting on the fact that people lament that the culture is not cloak and dagger anymore. That it's a lot more corporate, but it's more corporate because it's a good thing. Like it's grown into something where we can learn now. We can grow in a safe environment. We can make a good paycheck. We can explore these things, and you don't have to worry as much about ending up in a box.
Yeah, no. Yeah, it's like, even just think about the evolution of like security stuff over the years that I've done. Like, it's just, I don't know about you, but every single so often I'll think about it. I'm like, man, if I had a time machine to go back in the time with the same knowledge I have today, like fucking the world would be on fire, dude. Like if I knew everything that I know today and be able to go back in time as a 14-year-old, like, holy crap, dude. Like,
yeah, no kidding.
Because like even back then, like let's even talk about like early Linux days, like, using Red Hat or SUSE or whatever. Like you could just write a simple like, pulling shit from dev you ran and put into syscall and just find a bug the same day and exploit it the next second. Like it was so different back then. Like everything now is like on this like hardening trend and stuff like that, which is totally cool. But it was very like, I would say kind of Wild West back then, because it was like, well, we have laws saying that you can't hack us. So like if we program
or that you can't use encryption. Remember when they used to consider encryption military grade, a military grade weapon?
Military grade, I mean base 64, let's go.
Yeah.
But
and now like everything on the internet, even this call is encrypted, like everything is these days.
Like But the thing though, like the mindset was like, well, if you try to do anything against our product, like we have clauses against reverse engineering, we'll sue you and this and that, and we'll win because we have lawyers. And it's just like, fuck that shit. Like when
ISPs were trying to sue people or charge you double for having a router in your house, for having more than one computer hooked up to the internet. I don't know if you ever kept. I remember when that shit. I mean, it's wild the things they used to try and get away with.
Yep, because they wanted to make you have like a additional cable modem for every single machine or some bullshit. Yeah, I remember that.
I remember that. That was wild.
Well, I remember like one of the big things that happened in the early 2000s was the TiVo lawsuit against like what GPL means and stuff like that. Because if I remember correctly, there was a lawsuit against TiVo because they were refusing like to release the source code for the Linux stuff they were using, and then they put like some things in it. It was almost like, I have to look it up, or you can look it up right now. It was about like you don't own the TiVo, you are renting or something, or leasing the TiVo when you purchase it. So like I remember that started this lawsuit about being able to like modify the things that you have. I forgot off the top of my head, but I remember that was like one big milestone in the early 2000s was the TiVoization lawsuit. I forgot what it was off my head, but anyways, like a lot of people, like companies, stuff like that, they back in the day was like, well, we have laws to protect us. So if anyone's reverse engineering our stuff or trying to hack us or do anything else, like we'll sue them. And it's just like, that's not a solution. That's just like, strong arming or like flexing. Like it's not going to get you very far. It's
That's what a lot of companies did. A lot of companies tried to strong arm for a long time.
Yeah. And as a researcher, you're just like, well, if I just drop the exploit live and a bunch of people use it, what the fuck are you going to do now? Like now your users are impacted, like seriously, like if you think about it, like if you're a company and you have a programming issue, and someone comes up to you in a respectable manner saying, hey, like I was playing around with the software and I found this particular bug that allows for someone to, let's just say, write an arbitrary file. And here's a proof of concept that allows to execute commands, right? So if someone came up to you, like as a company, was like trying to basically fix your product or make it better, if you just respond with a lawsuit, like that person has like a capability against your product. And like when bugs get exploited, like usually it not tarnishes, but it kind of ruins the reputation of the product a little bit. Shout out Fortinet, let's go. But like it's just like this almost like not cat and mouse, but almost like this like nuclear warhead type of game. Like, oh, you want to go, bro? You want to go? Like, who's gonna make the first move first? Like, it's not a good environment, and it's kind of like this like standoffish crap. So like it is nice to see like nowadays that companies have gone away from like suing people and trying to silence them. Yeah, most. To like more like
there's definitely still some out there that'll threaten you. I had a company threaten me legally with their legal department about a year ago. I'm sure you've seen it. A lot of people have probably seen it, the Gray Hat Warfare site. I don't know if you've used that one. It's just like scanning buckets. It just shows pub Azure and AWS buckets. It's nothing crazy. It's a nice search interface. And I was doing research on there, trying to see what I could find as far as like, just like VPN configs or, WordPress configs, things like that.
Yep. Yeah.
And I came across this company that was leaking HIPAA data. And I mean, they were leaking it in a real way too. Like it wasn't even like little, it was like bad HIPAA data. Yeah. So I was like, shit, well, I can't like not say anything about this and I can't say it publicly. So I'm like, whatever, I'll reach out to them. We'll see what we can do. So I found them on LinkedIn and I'm like, I'll reach out to them for my LinkedIn. They can see my background. Like they can see I'm a legit dude. I'm here in the US. So I remember I sent him a message. I was like, hey, look, I'm not trying to get any money. I'm just letting you know this is a free service. I was doing research unrelated to your company. I came across this bucket. It's improperly configured. You're leaking a ton of HIPAA data. Here's the evidence. Please have somebody at your IT department fix this or have them reach out to me. I'm happy to talk to them. I swear to God, they responded almost immediately with, We've informed our legal department you are to stop right now. If you do anything else, our legal department will contact you. It'll be lawsuits. And I was like, well, you can tell your legal department that they can get bent because like I did this as a favor for you. And, like I just couldn't believe it. I'm like, man, it was 2024 or whatever at the time. I'm like, I can't believe this is still the conversation we're having. I'm like, if I wanted to do any harm to your company, you really think I would reach out to my personal LinkedIn?
Right.
with all my contact information. But anyways, yeah, most companies though, I think are trying to head in the correct direction. And the hardening direction is like you were saying. Where we're trying to like fix these issues.
Like, I think, wasn't there like a law passed in the States or something like that about good faith hacking? Like now we can kind of be like, hey, as long as they can prove that your testing was done in good faith, like you can't really sue someone. But
I don't know if it's a law, but I do know that a lot of companies, they practice like safe harbor or whatever, where if you come to them and you try and be legit about it or whatever, that a lot of times they'll promise not to sue you.
Yeah, no, I remember there was something signed. Yeah, I have to look it up. I remember there was something that was signed because I remember a lot of the digital rights advocate people were celebrating it. I just
probably a good question for the EFF.
Yeah. I remember it happened like a few years ago. I think it was like 03 or 02. I don't remember off the top of my head 100%. I would have to Google it, but anyways, it's different nowadays, I guess, than versus back then.
They'll be at DEF CON, I'm sure, as they always are. Are you going this year?
No, so I've been in this industry for like professionally about a decade, a little bit over a decade.
So you're burnt out on it.
It's not really just that. It's like, how do I say it? Yeah, I guess so. But it's just like if I want to consume like the actual information from a talk, looking at it in a video is much better for me because I can pause it. I can go back. When you're in an audience, you don't really have that ability. And there's a lot of people around you breathing and like talking and making noise.
And you're tired and hungover.
Most of the time, you can't even get inside the auditorium. You have to like stand up against a wall and the way in the back, and you can't really hear too well. Yeah, and it's like it's not really the most ideal environment to like consume information or to learn. Like it is more of like entertainment, in my opinion. Like
it is definitely for entertainment. Yeah.
So
networking.
Yeah, so like whenever I go to conventions, or if I do, I prefer single track conventions just because like I'm not really interested in like the whole spectrum of InfoSec. Like, cryptography is interesting and stuff like that, but I don't really want to sit down for a whole thing of that. I don't want to walk 20 miles to go from one place to another just to see the same track of talks. Like it's just kind of, it's a bit scattered for me. And so like so here's the thing. I'm sounding pretty negative about DEF CON. Let me back up. So like my first DEF CON experience was like when I was 25, 24. I still have my first DEF CON and black hat badge in my closet. I think it was 2012 or 2011. I forgot. It's in there, but it was pretty early. And like, I remember when I was young, like when I was in my 20s, like I'm in my late 30s, almost 40, stuff like that. So this was way back in the day when dinosaurs roamed the earth and all that stuff. But like, it was really cool because let's go back to when I was 14 again. I'm on the internet a lot, like IRC, Ellis Crowd, like your typical script kiddie dumbass. I found DEF CON for the first time. And this was like in 2001, 2002. I think it was like DEF CON 5, 6. It was one of like the single digit ones. Mm-hmm. And I remember just thinking like, this is so fucking cool, dude. Like I wish I could go there. And I remember asking my dad if we can go to Vegas for it. And he was like, fuck no.
Yeah, so I imagine that was his response.
That was out of the question. And then I found like black hat when I started working at HB when I was 19. I was like, well, what the fuck is this? And I'm like, $5,000 for like a training. Holy shit.
It's wild how expensive it is, isn't it?
I was like, let me ask my boss. And he was like, nope. So I was like, so it had always been like a dream to ever go there when I was younger. I was like, man, it'd be so cool just to like go there and just witness it. Like, I don't know what the fuck it is. I can see all these like little like 30-second clips that you can download these like, MPEG files, because there's no YouTube back then, right? It was just like download the video directly and run in QuickTime or Windows Media Player. Yeah. So like I remember seeing these things. I'm like, man, this is so fucking cool. And I remember seeing like there was like a reporter that tried to go undercover and they outed this person. And like I was like, man, what a crazy environment. I'm like, it'd be so cool just to be like a fly on the wall and just kind of like spectate. So I never had that opportunity until I was working for Tipping Point. Like I transferred from the NOC to Tipping Point, was able to do that. And that's how I moved from Houston to Austin, which is where I'm at today. I was part of So I'm kind of going to talk about like my resume here for a second, I guess. When I first joined Tipping Point, I was just QA. So QA involved like testing the IPS, testing all the filters, blah, 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 and making sure everything's all good. And that got me exposed to like tools called like Tomahawk, which is open source, but it's outdated. Tomahawk, you give it a PCAP, it splits it from server and client. So you can have the actual like, the 3-way handshake and then transfer all the data and then have the connection and then IPS, whether it detects or doesn't detect it. And then we can also modify the PCAP where we do something called a 4-way handshake for TCP. So you do like, you basically all you do is like, SYN, ACK, and then instead of SYN, ACK, you just split those up. So you send one SYN, one ACK, and that's your 4-way handshake. And those type of things usually bypass the majority of IPSs back in the day, like Snort and those other things. Mm-hmm. But it didn't bypass ours. So like we had a bunch of tools to test these type of things. Eventually one day, this is kind of fucked up, but this is the truth. One day I hear that one of the members in DV Labs passed away. And the story of how he passed away, I don't want to go into it. It's very sad. I don't want to get into it. But anyways, it's fucked up. There's a position open for DV Labs. And I was like, wow, like it's kind of like sad that someone died and now there's a position open, but there is an opportunity here to start learning like the actual vulnerability stuff that I missed out on when I was young. Now there's an opportunity to actually learn how all these hex numbers and crap that used to confuse the shit out of me when I was a kid, like this is an opportunity. So I applied and it was a very intense interview. Like they gave me a whole bunch of different files and stuff. And it's like, what's your guess as to what the bug is? And so like I guessed almost every single one except for the use after free case because I've never been exposed to that at the time. I got the job and the job was this. So I would have to write filters for the IPS for vulnerabilities that came in through our pipeline. The pipeline could be from Microsoft directly, which I will talk about in a second. Anyone who's ever dealt with Microsoft fucking vulns that have been analyzed by them. Anyways, so we also had like stuff from like TELUS and stuff, which was like from Canada. And we had a whole bunch of like end day feeds. It wasn't really 0-day stuff. Like there was ZDI that was next to us, but there was a particular person that was only available, only trusted to go and do ZDI filters. Totally understand that. So anyways, so now I'm in this position where I'm getting all these feeds. And like before the DV Labs, I used to do a bunch of like, war game server stuff because when I was in my mid 20s, I was like, I really want to get back into this hacking stuff. Like when I was in QA at Tipping Point, I was like, man, dude, like I need to learn how this shit works. If I ever want to move my career from networking to security, I need to learn how this shit works like legit. Can't fake it. Can't just do script kiddie shit. We need to actually learn this. And I started thinking, I was like, well, what I used to do when I was younger, like to get hands-on, like war game servers. So I just typed in war game server into Google and I found Smash the Stack. And then I found the IO levels and just started with level 1. And every single day from work, because I was single at the time and I was like in my mid 20s or, so like I didn't have any responsibilities. I didn't have like, a girlfriend or wife or anything like that. I was just alone. So I was like, dude, this is prime time for me to like grind.
It is really the best time.
So every single day from work and on the weekends, I would come home, I would sign on to Smash the Stack, get on the IRC channel and just start where I was. I would do level 0, then level 1, to work till I figured it out. Level 2, 3, 4, 5, got all the way to the brainfuck level. It was really cool. And I actually learned a lot, especially from the dude who owned the channel named Blah. I don't know who he is, but that dude was awesome. Every single time I asked a legitimate question with like, hey, I've been working on this for hours. Here's everything I've done. Can you point me in the right direction? And he did. That dude was so fucking helpful. Cool. Instead of being like, hey, just try harder, you scrub.
Yeah, try harder.
Shut the fuck
That's
up.
That's not too dissimilar to how I got into it too, because I was in software and I was introduced early on to security through, DerbyCon videos and DEF CON videos, just, stuff floating around on the web. And I really wanted to make that switch from software to security. And it took me a decade to do it because for a lot of reasons, but I had a lot of trouble making that jump from one to the other. And that was similar to what I did. I went out and found sites. I don't know if I'm sure you've been on it. It's called Hack This Site. That's like the OG. That's like the OG one, right? Like that's the original. I remember just working my way through the missions on a Hack This Site. And I was like, you know what? This is pretty cool. I understand this. Let's move on. Let's keep learning, and I moved on to Vuln Hub and, eventually Hack the Box, is now the new hotness and try Hack Me, all the new cool things. But yeah, that is generally how I did it too. I had my career. I wanted to make the switch into security. I started nibbling away at public content or things. And I think that's a good message for a lot of people to hear, specifically from you, because you're doing the real thing. Like I said, you have 0-day researcher in your title, security researcher, offensive security researcher in your title. Those are things that a lot of people aspire to, but they don't know how to. It's very hard to see the path to get there. Especially, I mean, even if you look at like my LinkedIn or your LinkedIn, I think I was looking at yours earlier. It's not clear how you get from point A to point Z. But when you have a conversation like this, you hear, like I started out as a kid, I was doing this thing, I learned a little bit, I got a little more interested in, and I started making those jumps, and I feel that's really valuable to people to hear. Yeah, specifically from you.
Even like, so you mentioned like VulnHub and all that stuff, or like Hack the Box. Back in the day, there was like websites called like Cyber Army, which had more or less, so like Cyber Army would give you like binaries to like reverse and like try to figure out like what the secret message that was inside of it that you had to enter into the website in order to get to the next level was. That was kind of cool. And then the other one was called Hack3R. Those were SSH servers, and with the same type of like, so have you ever done Smash the Stack? I think it's called NetGarage nowadays, but
no, I haven't messed with that one yet.
Yeah, so the way it works, it's really simple. It's just a SSH box, and you SSH into level 0, you SSH in. And there's a binary there that has rights of level 1 and stuff like that. So your goal is to execute bin.sh inside the context of level 1 and cat the password file for level 1 so you can disconnect and reconnect as level 1. Same thing for level 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So that's it's like cool. This escalation of like, levels. That's how it's worked. It's like almost like LPE type stuff. But then there's the other side where they have this huge banner. It's like, hey, if you're able to like exploit the kernel and stuff like that, let us know. Like that'd be really cool. So there was the other side of that where people were like popping O-Day and stuff like that just to get root, and then just
trying to go outside of the box.
Not even just that, just to like go and like hit what was the command? I forgot the command, but you'd be able to send a message to everyone that was connected to the same session or same machine. But like every so often you just get like a silly little message like owned by and then some dude, and it's like I'm like he got
cool.
root. That's awesome, dude. But so those servers were back, they were around, but they call them war game servers because of the movie War Games, right? And so that's kind of like how I found Smash the Stack, which was in the 2010s, which is still around as NetGarage. They now have like an ARM section of it. Back then it was just X6. Now they have an ARM. I think it's an AR64 and an ARM v7 level. So they have more architectures that you can play around with now, which is really cool. So doing those all the time, especially Smash the Stack, particularly the IO one, because there's other areas of things that they have like cryptography and stuff like that, but IO, input output, so mostly memory corruption stuff. That really got me prepared for the interviews for DB Labs, blah blah blah. So anyways, so I'm in this position now, and like I basically took it upon myself to root cause every single bug that came in through the pipeline after hours, because it was so tedious to do this stuff. So like the job was this. So you get a bug, whatever. Let's just say it's like a buffer overflow and some PDF viewer for IE, like some sort of extension. You get the POC and stuff like that. And like they would tell you the vulnerable version. So most of the times I would have to find a vulnerable version, download it, install it, blah, blah, and then trigger the bug. So doing that outside of hours actually gave me a lot of experience with debugging, gave me a lot of experience. So first it was like in Windows. So it gave me a lot of experience with WinBag, or WinDebug, whatever the fuck you want to call it.
WinDebug, which is an underrated tool I've used quite a bit. A lot of people don't use it enough.
Dude, it is so powerful. Like,
yeah. Did you see the new version that they have? The new UI and everything?
No, I haven't.
Through the Windows Store?
I haven't played with it in a long time. Like last time I played with it, they just put in like the rewinding and stuff like that. So the time travel, I think they call it. They had just put that in. That was the last time I used WinBag, because like ever since for the past like 6-7 years, I've been mostly in like Linux environments or Android environments. So I haven't really done most Windows research. Like last time I did Windows research was 8.1 days. So it's been a while. But either way, it gave me a lot of experience with WinBug, learning how to do dynamic breakpoints. Oh, sorry.
I saw in one of your talks, I believe it was the DEF CON 24 talk, you were talking about looking for debug comments that engineers had left behind in output console. I got just output, and it made me laugh because it's so true. Like I was an engineer for a lot of years, and that's what we do. Like we left the, debug.writeLine or whatever in there, and you never think about it, and you hope that it gets compiled out or whatever. I think that's the assumption that most engineers make, is like, once we do a release build, like you won't see that stuff. It's gone.
So real quick, so like I think that was one of my talks in like B-Sides San Francisco or something like that, but it was like the early days when I was getting to embedded hacking. So let's talk about that. So again, tipping point. I'm in DV Labs. I got this new coworker named Headless Zeke. Shout out Headless Zeke if you're listening right now. Let's go. But anyways, that dude is super awesome. Like he's super well experienced. Anyways, one day he comes into work and he's like, dude, I got this nasty vuln that I found, like with this really fucking 3 lines of Ruby. He used to write Ruby, and I used to give him shit for that. But anyways, that's besides the point.
As you should.
And he's like, anything using this chipset because of the SDK vulnerable. And I was like, no shit. It kind of got me thinking. I was like, how'd you find that? And he goes, honestly, dude, I was just at home looking at Wireshark, saw this weird traffic, and then I just kind of hunted it down, wrote a inline fuzzer thing just because it was just text based, and then just started mutating it, and I found a bug. I was like, no fucking way. So I was like, that's really cool, dude. And so like I go home and I'm like, well, I want to find bugs. So I start looking at the things I own. And I go, well, what's really shitty? And I had this wireless repeater.
It's a good place to start. Things you own.
Yeah, that's honestly what I recommend to anyone. It's like, and I can prove it in a second. Like I actually, that was my plan. So I had this really shitty repeater in my house, or it wasn't in my house. It was like I was renting a room in a house at the time, and I installed a repeater because the router was all the way downstairs and the signal to my bedroom sucked. So I installed a repeater. And so I was like, well, let's play with this repeater thing or whatever. And so one of the benefits that I had when I worked at Tipping Point was a IDA license. It was like IDA 6 something. And so super like privileged to have that. Really, really cool, whatever. So I start asking like, Heather Zeke, I'm like, hey man, like how did you like go about this? Like here's a firmware blob, like what do I do and all this stuff. And that's when he was like, hey man, like this is how it's all set up. But there's this like active project at the time. Like b1ack had just kind of started coming to the scene, like brand new. And he's like, honestly, I use this to extract all the magic records out, or to detect all the magic bytes and rip out everything based on that.
b1ack's shit.
Yeah. So I was like, okay, cool. So I did that. Extract everything. And I was like, okay. I'm like, well, what did you do next? Just kind of going back and forth. And he's like, well, did UART, blah, blah, blah. And having, father doing hardware stuff growing up, I knew what UART was, but I was like, I don't really have a serial interface. So we went back and forth, blah, blah, blah. Long story short, I went at it for like a week straight and found jack shit. So this is before I put things into IDA. So I was kind of black boxing everything. Like I had burp, which is, I don't like burp anymore. It's a whole different thing, but I was using burp and stuff like that to, modify requests from my browser to the repeater and blah, blah for the HP interface or the server, right? I found nothing, absolutely nothing. And I was so pissed, dude. I was like, dude, you wrote 3 lines of code and I found this huge vulnerability. I'm over here pounding away at dirt and I'm finding jack shit. So I was like, you know what? Fuck it. Let's throw this shit into IDA now. So I found the HP daemon. It was just called HPD, right? Super easy. Put into IDA and I start grepping for the strings that I'm seeing in burp for like the HP URI. I'm like, where is this being looked up and how is this stuff? Eventually I find all the handlers for all these different endpoints. And then I started finding all these command injection bugs. I found, I think it was like 12 or 13 bugs that day. And so like I go into work and stuff like that. I'm like, hey man, I found all these bugs. The only problem is you do need the password for it, which it's post auth. And it's like good first steps, but like you got to kill that off, dude. So I went back and like I didn't find anything right off the bat because I just didn't have the experience yet to be able to find more complicated bugs outside of like overwriting a buffer of an allocated size. I needed to learn more about this kind of stuff. Fast forward to like DEF CON, my first DEF CON or whatever, I did the IoT Village stuff. And they had this like 0-day contest thing. A week before, I was looking at any endpoint that didn't require authentication. I found one. And there was a buffer overflow in it. I was like, there we go.
Nice.
So So I wrote an exploit. It was a MIPS 1 chip. It wasn't like a MIPS 32, it was MIPS 1. It was a particular type of MIPS. It was like Lexra or something like that. It was this weird architecture. Well, not weird. It was a basic MIPS 1 architecture that had custom instructions on top of it. So like if I was using Redare to like, you know, write my shell code, which it's bad practice looking at it now. Now everything you should be doing everything in assembly and using an assembler to do everything for you instead of being like load word blah blah and copy and paste the bytes. No, use an assembler. Don't do that. Anyways, going back to that, when I was doing things by hand, like I would get illegal instructions and this and that. So that one took a while to exploit. And when I wrote the exploit, I was working at a place called Praetorian at the time as a pen tester. And my coworker Dylan was like, dude, you can like wrap this around JavaScript and you can hit this with a web browser. I was like, that's a cool idea. Yeah, dude, let's do that. Fuck yeah. So I'm like, if you visit a website, I can pop your router. Fuck yeah, dude. Hell yeah. That's dope. Because like we were looking at it, I'm like, man, all these routers and all these like wireless things, their local host, not local host, their like host file has these hard-coded DNS names that resolve to the IP address of the router. So even if you change your subnet or whatever, like I'm not a 192, I'm on a 10 net. Well, if I just put in the host name instead of the IP, you're going to resolve it and hit it for me. So like we were able to chain it to like a CSRF to code execution type thing. So I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. So that's kind of started like my venture off into the 0-day land was like, I found those bugs. And then I kept with the mindset of like, well, let's keep looking at stuff I own. I was like, well, I have Steam. Fuck it. Let's look at Steam. So then I found a bug in Steam.
Nice.
And it was memory corruption, but it was like in a protobuf type thing. And I couldn't find a way to exploit it. So it was just a persistent DOS. And it was within the home streaming stuff or in-home streaming stuff. So like you can have a game render on one machine and have it play on a monitor all the way upstairs or a different device.
Yeah, I've seen that before.
Yeah. So it was in that. And I found it super easy. It was like black box. You know, it's just, again, Wireshark and just play around with traffic, capture some stuff, replay the bytes over, and eventually it just crashed. Just had a window bug attached to it and it crashed. And then I took the POC and brought it to ZDI and they were like, can you get code exec out of it? And I was like, So then I tried and tried. I couldn't get it. And then so we just labeled it as a DOS. And you can find it. If you look up like Steam, Elvis, DD Labs, it should come up. It's like ZDI 14 something. It's a long time ago, but that's kind of like how I started venturing off into the O-Day world, which kind of just like, you know, if you think about it, people who are, you know, attackers or whatever are attacking the things that you own and interact with every day. So if you're going to find bugs, why don't you just beat them to the punch and start looking for shit yourself inside the things you already own and use every day? It makes sense instead of like, oh, I'm going to fork over $1,000 for this phone and there's no guarantee I'm going to find anything. Like that's not really a good advice for someone, like especially someone who's like, you know, in college or doesn't have financial needs to buy all these devices. It almost feels like buying a ticket to like, you know, an event. And it's like, oh, you can do research on this, but you have to spend $1,400 first. It's like, fuck that. Sorry.
I always found I enjoy doing research on stuff. I always found finding 0 days as magical. I never really got into it. The things I always focused on were like, oh, I'm learning some security stuff. I'm seeing how professionals do it in the industry. And that process they're using is really like verbose, or like there's just it's repetitive. I'm really good at programming. I bet you I can like write a program that does this, and then I go down the rabbit hole, you know. And the majority of the work that I've done has been around writing tools. Like I'll write shell handlers. I'll write. I remember I wrote one of the first JavaScript miners where like you load my tool on a network and it ARP spoofs everybody and redirects their traffic through you. And then anytime there's like plain text traffic, it drops JavaScript miners into the responses and sends it back to them, like stuff like that, you know, just for fun.
Ooh, man, ARP poisoning reminds me of my Cain and Abel days. Holy crap.
But that's, you know, in my mind, those are, you know, a lot of people say, oh, well, why would you waste time on that? But like those fundamentals, that's how you learn. You know, if you don't have the fundamentals, if you don't learn those basic things, even if they're really stupid. So good example, I posted a couple days ago that, you know, I was learning the math behind training neural networks. And a lot of people we constantly have these conversations at work and what they're doing and what they're not doing. And, you know, so much of the discussion is abstract because nobody really understands fully fully how it works. And I was just like, you know what? I'm going to be that guy. I'm going to learn everything there is to know about like it all the way down to the math level, and then work my way. I'll work my way up from there. I'll learn the fundamentals and then work my way up. And that was what I did. So I trained a 1 neuron neural net on a piece of paper by hand, just one epoch,
Yeah.
because like to for real train it, it would take like, hundreds of epochs or whatever. And I'm not going to sit there and fill up a notebook of math, but, just to understand that little bit of it made it unlock so much more. And I feel like that's true with a lot of this stuff. If you just learn the fundamentals of like how bash works, just learn how strings work, just learn how grep works, and then you start building out like all these skill sets that, I mean, then when you start getting up to things like b1ack, right? And you're talking about like, or decompiling applications and looking at like how they're working, or looking at them at runtime in WinDebug. There's just the fundamentals, like good WinDebug. That's a good one to talk about. So it's all hexadecimal and addresses, right? Like it's very, if you're not comfortable with that stuff, you're going to have a bad time kind of thing. You really want to understand those things, but to understand that you have to go back and you have to learn what a memory address is and how it works and why it works and how the stack works and how the heap works. And like, that's along the lines of how I view this field. Is you start out with the fundamentals, and so many people that I've spoken to, that's where they began with the fundamentals,
Yep.
and they worked, and it wasn't intentional. A lot of times it was just like the nature of how they learned,
So like, there's one thing that I kind of keep in my mind where like, this is how I believe you can kind of learn almost anything in the world around you. Like, this is kind of a big statement, but all you have to do is have motivation, set a goal. It can be any goal, because once you throw yourself at it, you can really evaluate the goal and say, that's a little too ambitious. Maybe pull it back and let's try a different goal instead. And then you just keep doing that over and over again. And you just keep, throwing yourself at it, set a new goal, try to achieve it. Did you know? Well, let's go back. Is there a sub goal that we can hit? Just keep doing that shit over and over again. You'll eventually hit it. For example, when I was younger, like I really like car engines, not cars per se, just engines. And so like one of my first goals was like, I don't know how to change my oil. I never changed my oil in my entire life. No one taught me how to change oil. So my goal was I want to learn how to change my oil. Before that, I didn't know what a socket wrench was. So, okay, I need to learn what a socket wrench is. Like all these other things. So you do the same thing in security. And like, so like, let's just say you're doing 0-day hunting on, I don't know, dude. Let's just say 0-day hunting on like Windows, or not Windows, because I haven't done Windows in forever, dude. Let's just say an embedded device, something really simple. Well, before even going into it, you're going to be like, well, let's just say you have no embedded experience whatsoever. So you're going to set a goal. Well, I want to achieve connecting to UART and those type of things. And then you eventually do it. And then along the way, you're going to fuck up a lot of times. You're going to stumble. You're going to fail. You're going to roll all over the place. You're going to
let out the magic smoke.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, dude, all day. But the thing is,
it only comes out once.
Eventually, yeah, right. Eventually, though, you'll get it. You'll eventually get it. And once you get it, now you understand why you failed in the past and, how not to repeat those mistakes. And now you have building blocks of the thought process of how you got there. So it's like, okay, so like one thing I don't agree with in this industry or in the community per se, it's just a lot of people, like when I was doing embedded stuff, the number one comment was like, why are you spending your time on that? That's junk hacking. You're not learning anything. And I respond with nay. And the reason why is because, well, these applications still C at the end of the day. Everything is around us, mostly C and C++. If you want to say Rust and Golang, sure, whatever.
Well, there's a lot of companies that still use, and I can't say the company I work for, but the company I work for, we have a lot of devices that are IoT devices in around the world. And I mean, like, yeah, it's still a real thing. Like, it's not like that's a bad field. That's still very relevant.
Yeah. But the thing is, though, like, it'll give you experience with like learning your disassembler, whether you're using Radare or Radari, or however the fuck you want to pronounce it, whether you're using Binja or Binary Ninja. Some people don't like saying the word Binja, or IDA, which I don't agree with their subscription model anymore, but they are the ones with the most amount of CPU architecture supported right out of the box. But it gives you more experience with even just using your disassembler. And also it gives you experience with like, all right, if you have to shellcode something, like, are you going to do it by hand by using like an assembler to do one instruction in a line? Or are you going to write assembly and have the assembler spit out the instructions? Or are you going to use the C compiler in order to spit out all the assembly instructions for you and write your shellcode like that? Quick tip for anyone that is looking to do like shell coding or anything like that: use your compiler. Do not write shellcode one instruction at a line statically with static bytes. Don't do that. Use an assembler or use your C compiler. You will save so much time and you'll have less headaches, guaranteed. And it will speed up your workflow at the end of the day. So, sorry, out of that way, doing all these like embedded stuff gives you experience with all these fundamentals that you still need to do with other environments. So like you learn how to write assembly, you'll learn how to write C stuff, you'll learn about how to manipulate or use your compiler to your advantage to spit out your shell code instead of being like, oh, it's an exe file. Like, no, you can spit out all this crap for you, dude. It gives you all the experience, and also gives you experience using like build root and cross compiling your tools. Like, oh, I need to put GDB server on here so I can remotely debug this userland application. I need to compile strace so I can attach to this application and see what syscalls it does, and then filter them by like exkeeve only or read or open or whatever the fuck you want to look at for these syscalls that are like kind of dangerous to use. So like it gives you experience all those things, and even the cross compiling stuff. Like you cross compile, throw it on there, and you're like, wait, I'm missing a dynamic library. So now you learn how to statically compile stuff. So it gives you a lot of experience right out of the box for newcomers, and all the stuff's there for free. Like you can download build root, build it. You can cross compile for almost everything. Like you're not going to be able to build hexagon stuff, which is a totally different architecture. Like Qualcomm, girl, what the fuck you doing?
What do you think of tools like MS
Venom? So Jesus, like, that's way, dude. Oh my god, it's been a while. So
because when you talk about making shellcode, like that's the first thing that I use.
Well, like those are like static things as well. When you're talking about shellcode, you're literally just saying a stream of bytes that does something. So whether you're like, oh, my shellcode is going to, do a reverse TCP connection and, create a new file descriptor and attach it to CMD or whatever the fuck it is. Like normally your reverse shell type stuff, or like, oh, I'm gonna use interpreter and blah, blah. But if you think about it, you're just executing arbitrary instructions, and it could be anything. It could be anything you want. You can do my shellcode does printf or puts, not printf because it's a format string. Puts hello, right? Put string hello, and that's it. That's all it does. It calls that one C function. It passes the arguments, whether if it's x86, it's going to be on the stack. If it's in or if it's fast call, it's going to be in a register or whatever, right? That's the fundamentals. And when people think of like, oh, shell coding this and that, they always attribute it to like, getting a shell. But it can be anything that you want. Like, oh, I'm going to download something, or I'm going to like whatever the hell you want. You can make it do anything. I'm just going to open a file and say pwned. I'm going to reboot the machine. I'm going to, I don't know, dude, like blink some lights, like
encrypt all the files and demand Bitcoin.
Yeah, like that. Like you can do a lot of things. So like, and also in embedded, right? Like let's say you have a bug in, let's say a device driver. Let's go all the way up to the kernel level. Let's say you have something in a device driver and you are now able to like, let's say you got code execution now, right? Now what? What are you going to execute? Well, you can do a bunch of things. Like I know in Pwn2Own, like a lot of people will be like, well, I know the MMO address for the GPIO that controls the LED. So I'm going to blink, blink, blink Morse code to say pwned or something like that, or make it dance. And doing those type of like fun activities, like make programs or shellcodes that make you laugh, because you'll have motivation to make them. And if it makes you laugh, you can probably make other people laugh with it too. Like, for example, like Blastia Pwn2Own with the printers, making all this like old school, like crack generator stuff. Like, hell yeah, dude, that's so fucking badass. I love that kind of shit. Like doing
I was just telling that to somebody a couple days ago. They were asking me about how to break into programming, and I was telling them that you do things that you enjoy, like you could go get a book on C# or on C or on JavaScript and, work from page 1 to page 1000 or whatever. But that's like the most boring possible way to learn how to program. I always tell people to pick a project,
Yeah.
If you even if you don't know anything about anything, right? Make your goal that you want to have a fully functioning website or a phone app or a something, right? And then go build it. Even if it's total dog shit, you will, you'll learn the basics of how to make hello world on a phone screen and how to deploy it to your phone. And, those things are going to be fundamental in the next project that you do. The next project, now you're going to have buttons and you're going to be able to deploy to the phone, and you're going to make it connect to a web page, and pick things that you truly enjoy. And then on top of all of it, the most important part is have a GitHub account. Push your code to GitHub. Keep track of the projects you do. Even if they're stupid, keep track of the projects you do. I can't say that enough. Keep track of the projects you do, because if you want a real chance of getting a job in this field, there's going to be, my experience tells me that there's two things you really need. The first is you need to be able to show, get their attention. So having a GitHub is really great. You can show that there's work that you've done, you've completed projects, you've done things, right? And then the other step is you got to be able to talk about it. Because when you come into my interview and you sit down and your resume has 12,000 things on it, I'm going to pick something out of it and I'm going to go, well, I see here that you've worked with Rust. Tell me about a project that you've done.
Yeah, so I poured some water onto steel and Rust.
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah, but if the only thing you have to tell me is that I once wrote a hello world in Rust, it doesn't belong on your resume. Those are the types of interviews I personally like, are the ones where they drill into, they say, oh, I see you have OAuth. You've implemented OAuth on your resume. Tell me about your project. What portion? Did you do all of it? Did you do a portion of it? What were some troubles you ran into? Things like that. Do you see the same thing with what you're doing? Do you interview people for the companies you work with, or what types of things have you seen in interviews you've done?
So in the past, I used to work at this place called Exodus Intelligence for a while. I was a zero-day researcher there as well, and I did interview people for the end-day groups and the zero-day groups as well. And it comes down to this, essentially, real recognize real at the end of the day. You can tell right off the bat when someone comes down and they're just talking about security, you can mostly tell when someone's full of shit right off the bat and just trying to regurgitate stuff they found on Wikipedia or nowadays from ChatGPT or something like that. And you can tell that they don't have the experience, just because if you just have a normal conversation, they'll kind of hiccup here and there and you can kind of pick up on it. And you can drill into those areas. And if there's one of two areas, in my opinion. The people who double down on their bullshit are not really the people I want to work with, right? I don't really want to work with people who are making up things. It's not good for production. It's going to fuck things up and it's going to just slow things down. But if you respond with, dude, I don't know, but I really want to learn this or something like that, just be honest, then hell yeah, dude. If you have the drive and the motivation and stuff, but you just don't have the experience just because you never came across it, yeah, let's do it. Let's do this together. So one thing I used to do, or one of the things that my hiring manager and I did, and it's kind of frowned upon here and there, and I agree with it a little bit, but we did have a challenge that people would take home, and it was for the zero-day team only. This wasn't an end-day thing, and it was a vulnerability that we had found internally against HP Data Protect, I think it was, and it was a use after free vulnerability. And what we would do is we would give them the trigger, right? Here's a proof of concept, triggers the bug, write the exploit. That's the challenge.
That's a cool project.
So how can you gain code execution out of this? Gain PC control at least. And then we can figure the rest of this stuff out later. Do we have to, for example, on Windows, do we have to call, what was it called? I forgot. Virtual Protect. There we go. Dude, it's been so long. Do we have to call Virtual Protect in order to change the memory permissions on where we are, on the heap, on the stack or whatever, so we can change it from RW to RWX, those type of things. What do we need to do next? But very first thing, just get PC control. And so I would always keep up with some of the folks that are really motivated, but just never had this problem before. They just never got exposed to it. And so I would help them work it through. I'm I would ping them every so often and be like, hey, how you doing with this? Any updates? And if they're like, hey, I got the trigger, which is what we sent them, I'm just having problems figuring out the next steps. I'd be like, all right, do you have this loaded in a disassembler, or are you just using a debugger and trying to figure it out? And so some people will be like, oh, I'm just doing debugger. I'm like, dude, throw it in a disassembler and it'll make so much more sense as to what the next steps could be. It's a use after free. Can we, either way. So when it comes to hiring people and stuff like that, you don't really go by off like, what are you experienced on? Like those type of things are usually reserved for like just the title. Like, are you senior level? Are you principal? Where the fuck it is, right? But if you're just interviewing like, hey, I want to join the 0-day team and stuff like that, you don't have to be a master of everything. You just have to be real, and you have to have the motivation in order to be like, hey, like, like some of this shit, some days you'll find a bug in 2 seconds. Some days you'll take 6, 7, 8, 9 months and you'll fucking bash your head against the wall. Like it's a very dynamic game. You can't predict if you're going to find a bug today or not. It's very dynamic. So like when it comes to hiring people and stuff like that, you just need to find people who are like legit, don't bullshit their way around. Like if they don't know, they'll say, I don't know. And then, they'll try to work through it. And then the type of people as well who like, when they ask questions, they have substance to the questions and be like, I don't know. Like that's fine to not, it's fine to, I don't know something. That's totally cool. But if you don't try to, don't throw yourself at it a little bit, then it kind of feels like you gave up, which I understand. I've been in situations where I've looked at something and I just like flip the table and like, fuck this for now. But
that's like that rule on Stack Overflow that they eventually banned it. It's like, what have you tried? Remember, I don't know if you came across that, but they actually eventually banned that phrase on Stack Overflow because people would say, what have you tried? So
it is a little toxic. Everything.
Yeah. But it's true, right? Like you should have tried something. Somebody was talking to me earlier in the week and I was telling them, they were saying like, what should I? I said, well, you know what you want to learn. You want to learn how to be a programmer, go out and do it. That's the hard part. The learning to learn is the challenging part. And that's what we do in our field. It doesn't matter. I'm sure if you're on the sysadmin side or the networking side or the whatever, the programming side, you have to self-teach. That's quite a bit of what we do. Reading documentation, drilling in, trying things, and failing over and over and over, and having the perseverance to continue. I often tell my son, he asks me, about my job sometimes. And I tell him, well, you don't get into this job for money. You get into it because you have brain damage, like you get into it because you are capable of staring at a computer, tell you the same error for 12 hours.
Yeah. Like
and still wonder why.
There's like another thing you just touch up on like a little bit, like your like intention in this field for example is also very important. Like the people who are naturally curious and motivated into this field outside of money just because they just want to learn this information are going to do much better in the long run than people who are just like, I want to make okay today, pay me. Like you're only going to do
you're not going to do
bare minimum in order to achieve that goal.
If you survive at all. Yeah. I mean, there's been days that I've been in this field where I'm like, fuck, I don't even want to do this. And I love what I do, like I can only imagine somebody that is only here for the money. They're not.
Yeah, no, like, so let's talk about like kind of the evolution of like finding bugs nowadays. So like back in the day, you could sneeze at anything and find a bug, right? Like you could sneeze at literally anything and it would give you like a shell or a blue screen of death or whatever. That'd be it. The thing is though, like now with hardening, which is good, the hardening thing is good because now we have more stability in our products, that we use every day. Like for example, Windows ME used to blue screen every single day because it consumed memory like it was no going like it was his job, right? So there's a lot of things that are like better now that used to cause like system instability and stuff like that, like memory corruption that people wouldn't patch because like, oh, we need to like worry more about the user experience and these security issues or whatever. But the security issues were causing the instability in the first place. So it's like, yes, we're in a better place nowadays where like you can use almost any operating system on any hardware. You're not going to really have any issues. Like you can download like Ubuntu or Linux Mint or where the fuck you want and throw it on almost anything and it'll work right out of the box, which is great. Back in the day, you have to worry about your IRQ tables and make sure you don't have any conflicts and make sure you don't have any of this, any of that. Like it was a lot of like, not customization, but a lot of stuff you had to know. Nowadays, it's just kind of like automatic. So just throw in the disk, hit install, and bada bing, bada boom, you're good. So from a way, hardening is a good thing because of the stability that we have nowadays. Like you're not using your phone and it's restarting every 2 seconds. Like you can use your phone any day, time of night, and it's going to be reliable. Same thing with your computer or whatever. So from that perspective, it's good. Like if you're in so there's multiple ways you can say I'm a 0-day engineer. So there's some people who are in the 0-day industry to like report bugs and stuff like that, like Project Zero. for example. The thing is though, is like Project Zero and stuff, like, yeah, I don't know, like from a financials point of view, it doesn't make sense to me, but I don't know how they work from the get-go, so I'm not even going to get into that. But those type of people, like, yes, there are people out there that are trying to, you know, make things more difficult for folks like me, I guess you can say. But that thing now is going to be, so there's a side effect to that, in my opinion. And this could be reality, it could be not. I have no idea. But when you have something becoming more and more scarce in the industry, the amount of sharing is going to go down. So you can say there's a lot of resources and stuff like that on the internet. They're outdated for the most part, which is fine. Totally cool, because you're not going to learn how to do something today without learning the history of something. Like, for example, if you're going to do memory corruption, you should really start with like Windows XP Service Pack 1.
You should understand what memory corruption is, and you should...
It's not even just that. Like, there's a whole evolution of mitigations for memory corruption, for like everything from like DEP, right? Data execution prevention, all the way down to like, you know, assigning pointers pack. And they all have their varying degrees of like intensity and stuff like that. And it takes a lot of effort, or not effort, it takes a lot of motivation for someone to find a way to bypass it, right? So like, for example, before XP Service Pack 1, Windows had executable heap and stack. So you could just jump ESP and start executing, because most of the vulnerabilities were stack-based buffer overflows, and jump ESP was like your magic gadget to use in order to get code execution, because there was nothing preventing you from executing from the stack. Windows XP Service Pack 1 comes out. Now DEP is enabled. So now we have read-write on memories that are for read and writing, you know, stack and heap. There should be no reason why you're executing from these regions. So then, you know, well, how do you bypass that? Like when it came out, when Service Pack 1 came out for XP, everyone was like, memory corruption is dead. Like, you can ask anyone that was around that time, they'll say, yeah, memory corruption was dead on Windows when XP Service Pack 1 came out. But then ROPing, you know, that's what came out of it. Okay, well, instead of executing direct instructions, like direct, you know, the instructions on the stack, well, what if we just find the same instructions that are already in executable regions, and then just have pointers on the stack that will just return, and the stack adjusts the new pointer and jumps to that return. So then ROP came out of that, and it goes, oh, okay, cool. So then Metasploit, when that started becoming a thing after, you know, I believe HD sold it to Rapid7 or something, they started making something called like ROPDB. I don't know if you've ever heard of that back in the day, but it was a database of like ROP gadgets for common applications. Oh, here's a ROP gadget to get you a shell on IE blah, blah, or whatever, or Microsoft Word or whatever. So then the next mitigation came out. SLR. So, well, now you have all these gadgets that are randomized, or they're in places that are no longer static anymore for every single computer. So you have this evolution of things going down the line. And it's really cool to start at the beginning and learn all the way down, because it gives you the building blocks of like how to figure this crap out. If you just start at the hardest level, it's no different than picking up a brand new game, setting it at the hardest difficulty, and going, oh, this game sucks because it's too difficult.
Exactly. That's like, exactly what it is. It's exactly what it is. I mean, that's probably the best way for a person that's not in any of these fields to look at it. That's exactly it.
So that's when I kind of just go back to like, you know, or, you know, set a goal, dial it back if it's too ambitious, do the same thing, you know, like, oh, okay, maybe I need to dial it back. Let's start with something less difficult or less intense. So, and try to figure out like how I can bypass these type of things and stuff like that going forward.
If I may expand on that analogy a little, I do like that, that it's like setting a video game to the hardest. But once you're in a field, programming, for example, once you've learned how to play that FPS or that RPG, you can switch to another FPS or RPG with a different storyline, with, you know, maybe slightly different controls, but you understand.
Yes.
There's just this inherent understanding of how the game functions. And that's very similar for going from C# to Java or PHP to Python. Well, not PHP to Python, but you know what I mean? Like the idea is there that, you know, like you have these understandings.
Yeah. I mean, like when I was doing MIPS,
and a lot of people don't see that.
Like when I got introduced to MIPS, I was just making C applications and throwing them into IDA, and just kept doing that over and over and just looking at the instructions. And for example, I found this weird edge case on MIPS big Indian devices that are around for some reason. Memcopy, which is usually treating the length as unsigned, treats it as a signed integer. So if you have like a -1 memcopy, it actually falls through without anything happening because it's a signed integer inside MIPS devices. And for some reason, I don't know why. I don't know why the compiler, even though if you look at memcopy, that argument, the length argument, is set as unsigned, but when you compile it, it becomes a signed comparison. Or they're using the instructions for compare, but it's a signed compare. So it's like, oh, if the most significant bit is set, it's now a negative number, and a negative whatever is bigger than 1, no, by, you know, those type of things. So it's, or bigger than 0. But yeah, it's interesting. So like when you're saying like, oh, you know, you can pick up one thing and learn another thing. Yeah, you can, especially when you know your tools. I didn't know MIPS assembly. I didn't know ARM assembly, but I know C. So I'll write C, and I have a disassembler. Somebody already went through the troubles of learning the ISA and all that crap and writing it down and do all that crap.
There's nothing wrong with starting with C.
Yeah, well,
you know, you don't have to start with binary. You don't have to start with, you know, like soldering components together and learning how to make an AND gate. You know, you can start at C or, you know, some slightly higher language and learn a lot of these fundamentals.
It's just like whenever you want to learn something new, sometimes the things they've already learned or things they've already used, you can use this to your advantage to accelerate or even start your learning. Because everyone learns differently. For me, I learn by doing things hands-on. I'm a very visual person. Like, you can tell me something, but unless I like can visualize it, it's not going to stick unless I do it. So like for me, I have to do things in order for it to like make sense. Instead of being like,
that's how I am too.
Yeah,
that's exactly how I am.
So like when I was like,
I found switching over to pen testing not easy, but it came intuitive to me because I understood. I've built front end servers, I've built back end servers, I've built APIs, I've built, you know, native desktop applications. So when I started doing pen testing, it was obvious to me where issues lie. Like just because of you understand how things go together, you just know where to look. It's just a little bit easier, you know.
I've only done pen testing twice, or like professionally twice in my career. But my very first pen testing job was right out of DV Labs. And like I said before, when I was at HPIT, I was doing a lot of networking. So I already have a huge networking background. So I already knew crap like I know what sitter is, I know what VLAN tagging, untagging is, I know what it does to the TCP header when you have a tag interface. I know all that bullshit.
Don't minimalize that too, because that is important stuff to understand. Like that is a big part of what we do is understanding how those things go together. And a lot of people don't understand that.
So like when I was in pen testing, I was the one I found my way into was external network pen tests. Those were the ones I always won at. Not to sound like, oh, I'm bragging and stuff like that, but like I just had the knowledge from network engineering to be like, all right, I know what I'm looking at. I know that like, all right, here's all the public IPs and here's the non-routable IPs. So they're only going to be from edge, you know, from all the way just the L2 devices or L3 devices, just switches and then hitting the router's edge before they hit their VLANs and route to it somewhere else. But anyways, so I had all this knowledge already. And then also like being in DV Labs gave me all this end day stuff. So I already had like a bunch of like bugs where like, for example, I found a 0 day by accident during a pen test. So I got brought on to a pen test for some college. I forgot what it was. But the pen test had been going on for a month already. And both the internal and external were finding nothing. And so my coworker found that there was like this bulletin board thing for the school. And they had this admin interface already enabled. And I found this file upload feature, but it had a whitelist. Right? It said only .jpeg, .png, and .bmp are permitted. That's it. Mm-hmm. And I was like, it's an ASP application. I was like, man, if I could write something with an ASP extension, like game over, hopefully, right? So I started looking at it. I'm like, well,
try all the usual things, appending a space and another extension and putting a null byte in the file extension name. And
so let's think about this, right? So whitelisting. So it's looking at, so if you're going to program this, so this is the thought process I go through whenever I'm looking at something. How would I create it? Like, how would you make this? If someone tasked you, make this, how would you do it? So, okay, whitelists on uploads. You know, it's a content disposition file upload. So you have your little file name, blah, blah, and then you have your blob and then your separator, and then the next thing, and then terminator. So I was like thinking about it. I was like, well, shit. I was like, So Windows file name, stuff like that is Unicode. So 16-bit characters. So I was like thinking about it. I was like, well, if we can have the end or whatever satisfy the whitelist, maybe there's a way to trim that off when it makes the file name. So I played around and what you said. But the way it worked is that inside the content position, inside the file name parameter, you would do like foobar.asp, a literal null byte, not like % encoded or anything, like a literal null byte, and then JPEG.
Hang on, unpack that for a second, because I'm thinking %00. What would you actually put in there?
Like an actual null byte.
Interesting.
An actual null byte, not percent encoded, because %00 is what? 32, no wait, 25, 32, 32, no, 25, 33. That would be %00. So, but in byte representation, I'm talking about like the actual null byte 00, the actual. So you do that dot JPEG, because in Unicode, termination is double null, null, null. If you have a single one, how does it treat it? So we get the file name in. The file name is not terminated. It's not a string where it's 8 bits, 16 bits. So it gets to the end, it finds the last dot, looks at the extension, finds JPEG, cool, takes that file name. Now we're in the syscall of like write file. That null gets turned into double null and gets dropped off. And when it creates the file, now you have foobar.asp. Now you have code execution on the box. So I found that out just completely by accident. Like I was just like, all right, let's just try some bullshit, right? And it worked. Like sometimes you just throw some
That's cool though.
You just throw some shit at the wall just based on the experience that you've seen in the past, just from bugs I've seen in the past that I had to write filters for. I'm like, hey, let's just try this because I've seen this kind of before in the past. And it worked. So like, I passed that over to the internal people and we were able to get DA and all that stuff. Like it was a huge win. But disclosing that was also a pain in the ass because I tried going through customer support and they kept hanging up on me. And then it took the CEO to go on LinkedIn, find the CEO of that company and ping him and say, hey, we're trying to disclose a vulnerability in your software that's being used by schools. So like, that was cool, whatever. But like, if I didn't have the experience from DV Labs, from seeing all those vulns and diving into them and debugging them and finding the root cause. So one thing I think is very important that no one really talks about, some people talk about it, but it kind of goes unnoticed. When people are talking about how should I learn bugs? How should I learn all this stuff? Yes, learn programming because hacking is an edge case of programming, in my opinion.
You mentioned that you reached out to the CEO on LinkedIn, and I was laughing because I won a bounty about a year or two ago doing that. I found a VPN config on it was actually this in the same research as the other one that I got the legal threat from. I found another company that had a VPN config file just sitting in a bucket, and it lets you just like connect with their creds and everything straight to their dev network. And I was like, holy shit, kind of thing, So I found their CEO on LinkedIn and I was like, hey, just to let you know, this is probably not ideal. And he's like, hey, I really appreciate you finding this. Thank you. You saved us a big issue. Here's a huge bounty. So like that stuff definitely exists. And I definitely don't discourage people from reaching out on LinkedIn.
Yeah, I
just don't make threats.
Sorry, I remember now after like blanking. Sorry. So one thing that people do talk about, but it kind of goes unnoticed. So like learning bugs in this field all comes down to learning how to do proper root cause analysis.
Yes.
Like,
yes,
it's a bit vague. It's a bit vague, but like once you know the root cause of what's causing the memory corruption or what's causing the badness, then you understand like how to find these things or even automate if you can to a degree, because
and that's a huge part of engineering that it's one thing for, so like if I'm working at a company and my lead comes down and says, hey, we have 1,000 customers that are their application is reporting back that they're getting a null exception, or something like that. Okay, great. What was the data they put in, what that caused this? What was the execution path that caused this? Let's see some stack traces. Let's reproduce it,
Yeah. Like,
and being able to figure that out, being able to debug it that way is a huge part. And once you understand it, fixing it is like the easy part. That's once you understand what the issue is, like fixing it is usually, not always, sometimes it's a big refactor, but usually it's the easy part. It's like, oh, I just got to flip this bit over here.
Yeah. Like the main reason why like I really stress about that is because like when you're looking at like, let's just say buffer overflow stuff, like stack-based buffer overflow, like the super simple 101 that everyone gets, introduced to or whatever. You can be taught like, oh, jump ESP and stuff like that. But if you don't know why did PC end up being 4141 or whatever the fuck your ASCII thing was, like, why did that happen? And why was it written out of bounds? And why did this happen? If you don't ask those questions and you're just like, oh, I got code exec, I'm the baller, I got my interpreter running. Like, it's cool to see it happen, but you're not really learning or anything that can help you out with your career going forward. So like learning
it's like
how
a
to
step above script kiddie.
Because like, so for example, let's say, all right, you're in a job and your job is to fuzz stuff, right? And your fuzzer finds a whole bunch of crashes. How are you, let's say your fuzzer found, I don't know, 200 crashes, right? How are you going to go through all of those and find the bugs that are actually exploitable versus just some sort of assertion error, right? Like, if you don't have the experience of root causing bugs, you won't really have the knowledge to even tackle this problem. You may just do one at a time and take a whole week to do it versus writing some sort of automations in order to be like, hey, like for example, back in the day, for WinDebug, there used to be an extension called bang exploitable. And that was kind of like the first stepping stones when I was going into the stuff where I was like, how does this work? And I would look at the source code for that and be like, oh, okay, it's kind of walking through and looking for this and this, and it's doing its own heuristics or whatever. Or like for the Corland people, there's a script called mona.py when you're like making ROP gadgets off the bat. And like, how does that work? Oh, you describe a template and then it's going to find all the instructions for that template. Oh, okay, cool. How do you find the instructions? Like, it's all these things over and over again where you just keep asking, how does this work? How does that work? How does this work? Blah. And if you keep asking that kind of stuff, you're going to be a really good engineer. If you just assume things off the bat or go with garbage information that someone is just regurgitating because they're just assumptions, but they're saying it in a way that sounds like, oh, I'm very confident.
They sound like they have conviction.
Yeah, it's just like you're going to fall on your face. And that's another thing that I've learned in this industry too. There's going to be a lot of people that talk a lot of shit in your career. Like, for example, like I do I've done like Android research in the past and stuff like that. But before the Android research, I was doing a lot of embedded, right? And I've got a lot of comments from like people that I've like respected in the past in this industry who are like, stay here because you can't do Android. No, that's only reserved for like the super smart people and this and that.
I don't know about all that.
I kind of believed it at first, to be honest. I was like, all right, yeah, like maybe I just, my shit's weak, whatever. Like I need to level up or whatever a little bit more before I can get to this level.
There's a lot of gatekeepers in IT.
After jumping into that, dude, like find the same shit as like IoT stuff.
It's just a different flavor of the same bullshit.
Like my advice for like anyone get into this field, A, don't listen to anyone. Listen to yourself. B, listen to your curiosity right off the bat. C, look at the things you own and try to attack them. If you can't figure out how to reverse the things on them, keep looking for things that are maybe easier. You probably have a router in your house. You probably have like an old phone from like 10 years ago that's been sitting with a battery that's swelling, right? So like just find something and then like...
Maybe not that one.
Yeah.
Maybe throw that one out.
Replace the battery.
Yeah.
But like, that's all you have to do. Like some people really overcomplicate it and they like kind of like stagnate themselves. Like, oh, maybe it's going to be this huge mountain of like problems. But when you throw yourself at it, you actually realize like, oh, it's just a handful of things. And the stuff that was confusing me is just more or less like, you can make analogies to things you already know nowadays. So it's like, sorry. So like, I wish I can go back and kind of tell myself that like, hey, like you shouldn't listen to people. Like as long as you have the motivation for this stuff, you can learn anything in this field. At the end of the day, it's still programming. It's still either C or C++. It's still assembly at the end of the day. Even if you're looking at Java, yeah, you still have an interpreted language, but you still have Java bytecode or Kotlin, whatever the fuck you want to call it nowadays. You can use JADX. There's open source tools that you can use in order to get into like Android hacking and stuff like that. Like you don't have to spend $1 bajillion on Jeb, which, oh my God.
You don't have to spend money on almost anything. That's probably the coolest part about getting into programming or tech in general is like, shit, Apache's free. You get a Raspberry Pi for what, $35? Well, if you're lucky, you can get a Raspberry Pi. And like they're always sold out, but you know what I mean? Like the barrier of entry into this field is very low as far as money goes.
Yeah, it requires a lot of time. It requires a lot of time.
That is the most expensive part is the time. I like what you just said. If you are going to learn something new,
yep.
You personally are going to learn something new, regardless what portion of InfoSec or 0 days or anything programming, anything. If you are going to learn something new, where do you go? What is your source of information, of truth, and how do you like to learn?
Yeah. So, man, that's a good one. So you brought up, let's talk about baking for a little bit, even though it's not programming. So
Yeah, definitely.
So like, whenever, so let's talk about bacon for a second. So like, why did you even get into bacon or whatever? Like, what the fuck is this all about?
I got into it because I like baking pot brownies, but
Hey, so I was talking to my father a little bit ago, and dude's like 70 or whatever, and I asked him, like, I'm like, hey man, why don't you retire? You're working nonstop. You told me the other day you came home at like 11 p.m. You're 70, dude. Like, why are you grinding like you're 20? Like, you should be enjoying your life. Like, you don't know what may happen tomorrow. And he looks at me and he goes, it's because I have nothing to do. And everyone I knew who retired with nothing to do died within a year. So he goes, I don't feel like dying quite yet. So it kind of struck a note, and I was like, well, shit, I don't really have anything lined up for when I'm like 60, or anything else like that. Like right now, I'm on just the grind train, right? Just look at your disassembler all day, try to automate as much as you can, emulate as much as you can with being accurate to the actual device, blah, blah, blah. But it's like when I'm old, dude, like super old, like super like, like damn kids and their internet. Like when I'm super old, dude, like I don't want to be doing that still. Like it's stressful. Like it is a great job. Don't get me wrong. Like I love what I do. Maybe I'm a masochist or whatever. Is that the term? Like when someone likes to, pain or whatever?
yeah. And that's exactly how I would describe it.
But like
even from my perspective too, that's exactly how I would describe it.
Like I'm gonna be real with you. At the end of the day, when I find an exploitable crash, the legit high I get from it is can't beat it to anything. It's still the same. So the very first time I ever exploited a buffer overflow, that same excitement still happens today when I find an exploitable bug. It is so euphoric. It is so addicting. It is like anything else in this world for me. So like that's my motivation. It's just like it's fucking hilarious to make an application do something it's not supposed to do. I don't know why. I just find it hilarious. Like, oh hi, your PDF reader is now connected to me and has a shell. Like how stupid. Like I don't know why. Yes. It's just hilarious to me. So like that's what keeps me going today, and that's why I've been doing this for so long. It's just like I love it. It makes me have these feelings that I can't get anywhere else in this world. And on top of it, so like one thing I just want to go touch about real quick was about like how do you get into this field, right? It's kind of a niche industry. Like for example, I've been around different like exploit brokers, and I've seen the same faces a few times. I went from Exodus to another place, and I've seen about 3 or 4 of my old coworkers. I'm like, yo, what's up? What the fuck? So it's a really small community. And my advice is this. 1, get into CTFs, not for the skills, but for the networking that you can do. Talk to people, like just online. You don't have to be on a phone call. Just be like, hey, is anyone accepting some new people for their group for me to learn on their CTF? Most CTF teams, unless you're like some hardcore, like, gatekeepy kind, are going to allow you in. And then you join their Discord or their Slack or their IRC channel, wherever the fuck they
start seeing the shit they're doing. Just you pick up on the little things, I'm sure.
Well, it's not even just that. It's like a lot of people focus on like the skills, but they miss out on the interaction with people. That's the most important part. Like when you're on CTFs and stuff like that and you participate and you're like contributing, you are starting to make connections with people who are working with you. You are legitimately working right now, but you don't know it. You're just trying to solve problems. It's like a video game to you. But the people you are working with can now back up your work and be like, hey, I worked with this guy in a CTF. He's legit. Let's bring him in. That's cool. And then on top of it, too, if there's a training that you believe that will help you in some way, not just some like get rich quick bootcamp bullshit on XXS, some regurgitated bullshit you can find on Google.
Yes.
If you can find an in-person or online training with people like on a Zoom call, do it, because that's another opportunity to network with other students who will have the same motivation as you, the same type of, like perception of what you're looking at. Because 5-10 years from now, those people will be in positions that, maybe you want to be part of their team. Maybe they're part of a zero-day research team. Maybe they're a manager for some team and they can bring you in. That's how you're going to get into this field. You're not going to get into this field by going on LinkedIn and applying to random job postings. You can get some interviews and stuff like that. But if you actually want to be in this field, you need to make the connections happen. And the best way to make that happen is to throw yourself at CTFs. Don't have to be a wizard. Be real. Like just stumble, fall, show work, be legit. and just keep those connections alive. Don't try to burn bridges because you think you're Mr. Robot or some bullshit. You're not Dade Murphy. Pull it back. Like, be legit. So like, yeah, that's like how I would explain it to anyone. Like, not explain, but like really, advise anyone is like, if you really want to be in this either 0-day field or end day, end day is also very, 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 very good for anyone who wants to build up their skill sets. You'll be exposed to all types of vulnerabilities, buffer overflows, local file inclusions, remote file inclusions, use after freeze, double freeze, whatever the fuck it is. You will be exposed to all that. And then as you work through all those end days and you're making filters or you're writing exploits for these end days, which is another type of field that's actually pretty popular. Like, for example, I know there's IPS companies. I don't know if there's even IPS companies anymore. There are security companies that really want weaponized end days to do like red teaming, to do practices internal. Like, they don't want to spend the money to have a Chrome end day developed.
I think a lot of people would be surprised at how many companies out there that have absolutely nothing to do with software or security are interested in having red teams or pen testers. I think a lot of people would be surprised if they spend a little time looking the kind of companies out there. I mean, just totally unrelated to software. They want that stuff. It's a big field. And I totally agree with the CTF thing in the networking. I think that's a great avenue.
The last thing I just want to put out there is learning the technical stuff now. Like, there's so much noise on Twitter or X or whatever the hell you want to call it about like, take my course, blah, blah, blah. You can do all this free. Metasploit is free. Oh, there's tons of exploits on there. Kernel, userland, Windows.
Yeah,
Linux.
Exploit DB. It's literally a database of open source exploits.
So all this information is there. Another great learning experience is setting up environments, like exploitable environments, like vulnerable environments for these things to be in. Like, for example, MS08067 or whatever, the SMB bug that everyone in their
the most famous exploit ever.
That's a kernel, that's like a system level like exploit, which requires process continuation, or else you're going to blue screen. So like when you're doing exploitation, like you're learning like the types of like degrees that you do, it's like, all right, you do your first buffer overflow, jump ESP. And then you do the ROP version of that where you're like, oh, jump to virtual protect, change the permissions of the stack. And now it's RWX and I jump to the stack. So the thing is though, it's like, okay, your shell code executes, but then when you kill the shell, the process crashes. That's not ideal. Or the process hangs because everything, your socket is blocking everything, right? Like that's not ideal. That's not a real world thing that happens. If you're going to level up like your shell code and stuff like that, you need to start challenging yourself. So, okay, this is crashing. Why is it crashing? Root cause that. Why is your shell code crashing after execution? So now you have to get into process continuation. So now you have to develop shell code that patches or unfucks per se all the things that you did, so that when you exit your shell code or your shell code is spawned into a new thread, the main application still runs as intended. For example, if you're going to pop someone on a web browser, that Chrome renderer and everything should still keep running. So there's no like, oh, it crashed. Why did it crash? That's a huge indicator of compromise.
Yeah, it's an indication.
So it's like, okay, you can write shellcode, all this other stuff. Now make it not crash, and you can re-exploit it over and over and over and over and over. Challenge yourself to do that, because when you get into kernel level stuff, you have to do that. Like there's no like jump ESP and then, I exit and then the whole kernel crashes. No, that's not
the kernel could just take down the kernel.
That's not going to work. That's not going to work. So it's like, oh, okay, I have to make a new process. I have to assign, the user, the root user ID and the group to it and all that stuff for this new process. And then I have to execute the new process. Then I have my shell. Like there's all these things that you can always challenge yourself. But like when you're doing exploitation, I just say like, process continuation was one challenge that took me a long time, because it's very easy to get code execution, but you have to learn your target like inside and out in order to get it to not crash after exploiting it with your state machine. So it's like, all right, you have memory corruption, you root cause it. Now, how do you fix everything so that everything works as intended, as if there was no memory corruption? Do that. So that's part of your shell code. So like when you're doing shell coding, you'll have like comments like clean up, then do the bad thing, or do the shell stuff, and then like create the thread in return, like those type of things. So like, yeah, sorry. So those type of things you're gonna have to learn, and when it just takes practice, dude. Like you're not gonna be able to like do this stuff on the field on the fly and like do it in prod or whatever. You have to do these things in private. You have to challenge yourself. Sorry. So like at the end of the day,
what you're saying makes total sense.
Yeah,
you can't just like the whole, like you referenced Mr. Robot, the whole like just drop into somebody's bathroom and then like own their system from your cell phone. That's not real. Like that stuff takes like months of research. You learn things, you try things out, you rebuild environments locally. I think if you were going to point out anything unrealistic about that show, that was the most unrealistic thing, was that it wasn't that they were technically inaccurate at times, but it was that like he would just walk into a police station and own the police station. Like that's the silliest things.
So here's the funny part. So like here's the thing that I can kind of like put like a food for thought at the end of this, per se. So let's talk about routers again, or anything smart device, because that gets downplayed a lot. Well, let's say before I found the bug, let's just say, how are you going to have high impact for this type of thing? What kind of bug would you look for in the stack? Would it be like on the HP daemon, UPnP? Would it be userland? For me, the radio. So the radio has a driver, it has microcode, it has all these things that are inside of it that have a large attack surface. So if you can find a bug and a proprietary radio driver, which is all over the place, shout out Qualcomm, then you may be able to have a bug where you can literally fly a drone and own every single like ring camera, every single router, and just chill. So like there's a lot of attack surface outside of like network connections, stuff like that. Radios out there have a lot of attack surface, like Pwn. Like for mobile devices, like your baseband radio has a lot of attack surface. There's a lot of parsing with a lot of the frames that happen through your base station and to your user equipment, UE, a shout out 3GPP documentation. And like, yeah, so like those type of like things where it's like, oh, you can walk into somewhere and own something, is still a very big reality nowadays, because there's a lot of proprietary drivers and stuff that aren't really being looked at whatsoever. And with a lot of people downplaying smart devices, these things kind of go unlooked. And so you could have a bug that could devastate an entire neighborhood because everyone and their grandma has a ring camera, because it uses a TI instrument radio that's made by TI and programmed by TI and has its own RTOS and those other crap. Yeah. So like, just because the thing you're looking at looks like, junk hacking, you maybe have a high impact if you kind of look at it of like, well, what can I hit not remotely, but what can I hit while near distance? So with that kind of said, like there's more attack surface then everything has a lot of attack surface than originally anticipated. If you just kind of look at it and kind of dig into the different things, you'll find a lot of can of worms. And that's the whole part of like zero day industry, you can say. It's find an area that you don't know about, and find an area that hasn't been researched about whatsoever. No DEF CON talks, no white papers, no fuzzing papers, no tweets or whatever, and barely any documentation about it. If you find these things, you'll find these low-hanging fruits that are still using stir copy or doing loops that are copying one byte to another and only breaking on a null byte. Shout out stir copy. Like, you'll find these things, but it takes a lot of effort. So one thing I've learned in this industry over time is that things that have a high barrier of entry have the most silliest bugs and the easiest to exploit. And one example I can give right off the bat. So what's his name? I think his name is Amit or something like that. Ahmad or something like that. Sorry if I mispronounce your name, dude. Don't hate me. He did a Pwn with his team a while ago, and they did a lot of over-the-air hacking on the modem and was able to get code execution and stuff like that. These were ASN unpacking bugs, type length values where you have a heap allocation that's static, but when it's decoding this stream, it has, this is, byte 60, which is this type, and then the length is 5, and then I'm going to unpack it into this buffer that's only 15 bytes. Then you have a buffer overflow. But then think about it. The root cause was a statically sized heap buffer. That is the most basic thing in the whole world. So you have something like a radio. Well, how do I connect to it? So like there's all these things that he's talked to in the past, like there's OpenBTS and stuff like that. And you can find open source software, but sometimes it takes like finding equipment off eBay, like these old base stations, and modifying them in order to connect and find these bugs. Like that's a high barrier of entry, kind of, because there's no real research about it done yet. But that's what it takes to be a researcher. Take something unknown and figure it out. It may take a day, it may take a year, but you're going to eventually figure it out if you're persistent enough. But if there's no one looking into this area as well, you will have a higher chance of finding some good bugs that are easy to exploit and just boom, 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 right out the door and have high impact. When you're researching and you're like having a lot of troubles, which happens to everyone, especially kernel researchers and stuff like that. Another advice that I have real quick, if you're really wanting to do this field, have a list of different targets based on difficulty. Have your main target that you look at, all this other stuff, like say it's a cell phone or whatever it is, and you really want to get code execution on that. You're going to get burned out from that eventually, and you're going to get tired. Find something simple to kick over, like find some shareware from 1990s. Commander Keen, download that and see if there's a save file exploit that you can write. Like if you do that and just context shift for a little bit and dev out an exploit, you'll get your confidence back. And it helps out a lot for me. And that was one advice I got from a colleague in the past. If you're getting burnt out, just
build your confidence a little bit.
Yeah, just look at something else for a little bit and like just know that you can do this, and it's just going to take a little bit more time. You just have to catch yourself doing that. Like it's really hard. Sometimes I've worked and just like gone and then like realize that like I'm hurting myself physically and all this other stuff, like my hips hurt and all this other crap.
Yeah,
so like
totally.
You need to eventually catch yourself. But yeah. Anyways, man. So sorry, just to recap, like if you want to get into this field, network, you need to you need to meet other people in this field. You need to interact with them and you need to work together. Joining the team and not doing anything is going to be worse for your career going forward, because now people see you as lazy or not contributing. And it's like, why would I want you on my team if you're not going to do anything, right? So if you're going to join a CTF team, participate at least and like just show a little bit of work and like just try. You don't have to solve anything. You just have to try. That's all is required. And then join classes, meet other people as well, other students, great way to network. And that's what I did with like my baking stuff as well. And then like learning the technical stuff, there's free information out there. It just takes some time to set up these environments. But if you set up these environments and you root cause everything, you will have so much more of a fundamental base, more than anyone else that you can find in this industry from like a get-go. And you'll have such a good foundation that like you can take almost anything. Like if I got thrown back to Windows and doing Windows research again, I just have to get up to date with kind of the mitigations gone into play, but I can pick it up again. It's not that big of a deal. If you just set up your vulnerable environments for different environments and learn how to use the tools. How do I use Windbag on Windows for user applications? How do I use Windbag on kernel on Windows? How do I use GDB on user applications on my desktop? How do I use GDB server on an embedded device? How do I cross-compile that and make it static for an embedded device? Like doing these things, stuff like that is going to make you the best researcher, the most hireable researcher right off the bat. No ego, be real. If you don't know, say, I don't know. Everyone will respect you for saying that. If you make up bullshit, you fucked up your reputation, and now everything that you say is not trustworthy.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah,
like that's it, man.
That is as true as it gets. I mean, I've heard that advice from lots of people in lots of different fields, and it stands true that you want to be honest, be upfront with people. And
like another advice is it's easier to reverse after you've gone forward. And what I mean by that is like, let's say you have a heap buffer overflow, like a linear one. How would I exploit it and all this other stuff, blah, blah. How about writing your own heap? Have you ever tried that before? Like you have a block that you allocate. Let's say you allocate a page, 4096 bytes or whatever. How do you put chunks of data in that and organize it all and make your own API, like my own malloc, my own free, my own realloc?
Yeah. That's how I approach stuff. I recreate the most ridiculous things, and people laugh at me for doing it. They're like, why are you rewriting this thing? There's only 1 million of them that exist. I'm like, because I want to know how it works. That's why.
Yeah. And like when you do that as well, it really helps with like emulation. For example, let's say I'm writing a fuzzer and stuff like that. One of the first things I would do, like most people would do, is hook all the libc stuff for like malloc, realloc, free, and replace it with your own heap allocator that's hardened. What do I mean by that? Make a heap allocator that can detect use after freeze, double freeze, right out of bounds. So then every single allocation that you have has like guard pages, so that if something writes into that guard page, you can trigger on that and go, boom, right out of bounds, here's the bug. Instead of looking for the side effect to take place. Sometimes you can write out of bounds in a heap thing and there's nothing adjacent to it and none of the metadata is touched because no other heap API is called. So nothing happens. There's no side effect, but you don't know about it because some people with their harnesses are looking for side effects to happen. So if you can replace the heap API with their own hardened heap, then you have a, much more granularity, you can say. You have more like information that you can pull from how the application is, using the heap during runtime. So writing your own heap, shadow stack, or whatever the fuck it is very valuable because you can take these things and apply it to your target. Like I said, for the heap stuff, you can write your own hardened heap. And like if you're using Unicorn, which is just QEMU with wrapper. Either way, if you're doing that, you can have a higher chance of finding bugs. And doing these type of custom things gives you an edge. The one thing that you need in this industry, if you're going to find ODAs, is an edge that no one else has at the moment. And that requires customization. So for example, if you're going to download, I don't know, let's say UPX, like everyone else does on their first thing, and try to fuzz that with AFL, you're not going to find shit. Because like, well, how does the mutation work? How do seeds even work as well before you start fuzzing? And how are you going to get code coverage? How are you going to do all this stuff? And then on top of that, what kind of bugs are you trying to trigger on? The more control you have over these things, the more success you'll have throughout, instead of just rolling the dice and hoping for a side effect to happen. So yeah. Everything that you do,
that's good advice.
Valuable. Yeah. Sorry. I can ramble for like decades about this.
That's all right. That's, you know what though? That shows people that you have passion. That's how I am. I have passion too.
If you do all these things, you have building blocks for like thought process, stuff like that. So I've been working on this little project. Shit. It's an old router. It's this old TP-Link router. I wrote a blog on it a little bit ago about a arbitrary free bug. That was inside one of the UPnP daemons, and like, how it worked and stuff like that, how to exploit and stuff like that, whatever. But it really got me thinking. I was like, man, dude, like, how could I, debug the wireless drivers and stuff like that, like the Wi-Fi drivers. So I started getting into like emulation. Well, this is a SOC. So then with the SOC, you have something called MMIO regions or memory mapped IO. So you have peripherals that have registers at hard-coded addresses. So like, for example, if I write the address foo, well, just put that out there, it makes the LED do something. That's an MMIO. But when you're emulating stuff, like you don't know what these things are. So what I was doing, I was like, well, I can get the firmware to run. So I made my own board in QEMU. It's really easy, but the APIs for memory APIs is kind of a bitch. But as long as you keep playing with it, it'll make sense after a while because the virtual and physical stuff get kind of messy. But once you understand how the TLB entries happen, then it kind of makes more sense. The idea was this. I was like, well, I don't know how this works. But if I wanted to learn how something works, what do? You sit in the middle, right? Like when you are looking at APIs for webs, you use a proxy like burp or man in the middle proxy or whatever, right? And you look at what's happening. So I was like, well, I have the physical device. Why can't I like either A, write a bootloader and have the bootloader have a peek and read for physical memory? Long story short, I found that in U-boot, you can actually have a sequence of bytes as your way to get into the U-boot shell. Because a lot of people are like, oh, control C or whatever to get to U-boot. There's another way. You can have a series of strings or a series of characters. Sorry. So a single string, series of characters that has to be pressed in the right sequence at the right time. Well, for this device, it boots in 1 second. So I found if you send the string TPL, it puts you in U-boot and all that stuff, and you get read and write access to physical memory. So what I did was in my QEMU stuff, once it hits this MMIO region, goes to this, it goes to UART, it's inside this like shell, and I just say read or write to this memory address and return what it does. And it works. And I can boot up basically almost the entire thing in QEMU while using the physical device. What that gains me is like, well, now I can fuzz the Wi-Fi driver because I can use the physical Wi-Fi chip in my virtual environment and get it to connect, and I can debug everything because I have control over everything. I'm the hypervisor. I can control everything. That's coming out soon, I hope. I'm not sure if it got accepted in Fract yet, but that's what I wrote for Fract was man in the middle MMIO for embedded devices, because you can apply this to anything that you can change the bootloader on.
When will you know if it's coming out in Fract?
I just waiting for the acceptance.
Yeah.
There was a few we went back and forth on the contents of it, so I had to add some more stuff. They wanted me to add like a skeleton for the board so people can take the board, compile it, and do it at home per se. And I was like, I'll put all that on there. And I even put like a blurb of like how to make this better, because when I first tried this, I was like, there's no way it's going to work. There's going to be latency issues and it's going to be like a pain. And when I saw it actually booting up and actually using the network interface, I was like, no way. Like there is some context missing. Like when certain things happen for like, let's say you're booting, you're synchronizing a clock, an interrupt has to be thrown. So you have to program that logic inside your board. Because an interrupt being thrown on a device is not going to go over UART. Those things are going to be the gotchas, but you get a lot more granularity as to like what these different commands that it's writing and what it's responding with do. But I wouldn't have thought of that thing if I didn't have the experience of doing like HP stuff in the past and man in the middle stuff in the past. I wouldn't have these building blocks. I wouldn't figure it out going, well, let me try to sit in the middle of this. I don't fucking know, dude. Just try it. And it worked. So anyway, that's
that's a good note to end on there. I really like tying it together with, you taking the fundamentals, the building blocks that you built up over time. And now you've transitioned to a point where you're writing and producing content for Fract, obviously, right? I'm excited. I can't wait to see when that comes out. So please share that and I will definitely reshare it for you.
Yeah, cool. Yeah.
Yeah. So Elvis, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time. b1ack0wl. So is there any other place other than X that people can reach you if they're interested in connecting with you?
No, that's the best place. Like I do have a Blue Sky per se, but I haven't really interacted with it too much. That's only because when I enable MTE on my phone, Blue Sky is so slow with MTE enabled for some reason.
Yeah.
But for
no worries.
For Twitter or whatever, that one works pretty well with MTE enabled. So I just kind of stick with that at the moment.
All right.
But yeah, that's the best place. You can just tweet at me or whatever. And
I'll make sure to put your Twitter/X handle in the show notes, as well as your website link and some of the presentations that you've given, because I did go through those and those were pretty good. And I think that they would definitely benefit people.
Yeah, no. So, just a quick disclaimer though, like everything on my website's a bit outdated at the moment. I need to update it. Like the project sections are all like disbanded.
No, I'm sure nobody worries about that. They just want to connect with you and learn more. Maybe you'll get some contributors help you work it out some more.
Thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah, thank you so much, Elvis. I really appreciate your time.
All right, man. Take care.